And I'll make that the hour. So, hello everyone. My name is Skitterskreetch, as always. And you join me today for quite an exciting little stream, as I'm once again going to be attempting to read an entire novel, albeit quite a short one, in a single sitting. Now I've got a little plan for that tonight. We're going to have a little thing that's run slightly different for that bit. But before we do that, we do as always have certain matters of business to take care of. The first of which is giving a very big thank you to RicoPod for the follow, which can happen between streams, but I do so much appreciate it, so thank you kindly, Rico. Assuming you're watching or will hear this later, and even if you're not, I do appreciate it.
Oh, the rat!
Abe, welcome in, good to have you. I'm just thanking Rico for a follow, but yeah. Hey indeed, I hope you're doing well. But yeah. So that's our first piece of business for the night. Second piece of business is, as always, got to put the community first. Oh, that's the wrong one. Play, claim first today, so we'll appreciate that and make our mark. And it's 8 strikes down. Firmly in second place, play. Firmly on there. I do so much appreciate it. That having been done, what's next? Well, next on the list would be if we had any new books today, but we don't. Which is almost a shame, because I almost thought otherwise I'd have a full house. Should have got something. Hour. Hindsight is 2020. Yeah. Thank you all for being here again. Yeah. And for those of you who are here, I do have some good news. Because as I maybe hinted at earlier on Twitter, there are badges today, since I'm going to be trying to do an old novel in one sitting again. And I haven't done a badge in a while, and it started to bother me. So, as always, I'm required to do a sub badge, so if you do feel like subscribing today, you will be receiving the fine badge of Mr. Harrison's stethoscope. Given that today is a small town medical drama, it felt like it was an appropriate piece of kit to have. And if you don't feel like subscribing, but you do want to stick around for at least an hour, you'll still get a little badge in the form of Mr. Harrison's head mirror, pictured here. But yeah, those are going today. So I do hope you stick around long enough to get one. Speaking of sticking around to get something, I do have a little game proposed for today. Seeing as we are doing a long read, it occurred to me that it was a good game I could put on. So, let me just head on over to the predictions, and we're going to do a little prediction today. Namely, will Skitter finish the book? Now, this is not the longest book I've ever done. I've done 4-hour sittings before, but it is a fairly old-fashioned and probably quite an heavy novel. So it's not going to be nothing. And there's every chance that I'll have to tap out before the end of it. So, I'm giving you the chance to wager some of your precious channel points on the outcome of whether I should do so or not. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to make your predictions, during which time we'll do our normal introduction, a bit of poetry and all that. So if you want to make your prediction, that is available to you now. So if you feel like gambling, do feel free. Yeah, other than that, as I mentioned, we do have some poetry today, and given that we are reading a book by Elizabeth Gaskell, this one here, to be more specific, and Elizabeth Gaskell is also known as a poet as well as an author, or a novelist I should say, I thought it would be an interesting little take to read some of her poetry, same way I did for Fitzgerald at one time. So we've got one of her poems here, specifically Sketches Among the Poor, number 1, which is fairly long in and of itself, so will probably be the only one we do tonight. And I'm going to read that while we wait for people to give people a chance to turn up before the main story. So, without any further ado, let me adjust the microphone for our poetry reading and then we'll begin. There we are. Now then, shall we get started? Sketches Among the Poor, number 1, by Elizabeth Gaskell. In childhood's days I do remember me, of one dark house behind an old elm tree, by gloomy streets surrounded where the flower, brought from the fresher air scarce for an hour, retained its fragrant scent, yet men lived there, yea, and in happiness the mind doth clear, in most dense airs its own bright atmosphere. But in the house of which I spake there dwelt one by whom all the weight of smoke was felt. She had o'erstepped the bound twixt youth and age, a single, not a lonely woman, sage, and thoughtful ever, yet most truly kind. Without the natural ties she sought to bind hearts unto hers, with gentle, useful love, prompt at each change in sympathy to move. And so she gained the affection which she prized from every living thing, howe'er despised, a call upon her tenderness whene'er the friends around her had a grief to share. And if in joy the kind one they forgot, she still rejoiced, and more was wanted not. Said I not truly she was not alone, though not at evening shared her clean hearthstone? To some she might prosaic seem, but me she always charmed with daily poesy. Felt in her every action, never heard, e'en as the mate of some sweet singing bird, that mute and still broods on her treasure nest, her heart's fond hope hid deep within her breast. And all her quiet duties one dear thought kept ever true and constant sway, not brought before the world, but garnered all the more, for being to herself a secret store. Whene'er she heard of country home, a smile came brightening o'er her serious face the while. She knew not that it came, yet in her heart a hope leaped up, of which that smile was part. She thought the time might come ere yet the bowl were broken at the fountain, where her soul might listen to its yearnings unreproved by thought of failure in the cause she loved, and she might leave the close and noisy street, and once again her childhood's home might greet. It was a pleasant place, that early home. The brook went singing by, leaving its foam among the flags and blue forget-me-not, and in a nook above that sheltered spot for ages stood a gnarled hawthorn tree, and if you passed in springtime you might see the knotted trunk all coronalled with flowers that every breeze shook down in fragrant showers. The earnest bees in odorous cells did lie, hymning their thanks with murmuring melody. The evening sun shone brightly on the green, and seemed to linger on the lonely scene, and if to others Mary's early nest showed poor and homely, to her loving breast a charm lay hidden in the very stains which time and weather left. The old dim panes, the grey rough moss, the house leak you might see, were chronicled in childhood's memory. And in her dreams she wandered far and wide among the hills, her sister at her side. That sister slept beneath a grassy tomb, ere time had robbed her of her first sweet bloom. O sleep, thou bringest back our childhood's heart, ere yet the dew exhale, the hope depart. Thou callest up the lost ones, sorrowed over, till sorrow herself hath lost her tearful power. Thine is the fairyland where shadows dwell, evoked in dreams by some strange hidden spell. But day and waking have their dream, O sleep, when hope and memory their fond watches keep. And such our Mary held supremest sway, when kindly labours tasked her hands all day. Employed her hands, her thoughts roamed far and free, till sense cooled down to calm reality. A few short weeks, and then unbound the chains which held her to another's woes or pains. Farewell to dusky street and shrouded skies, a treasured home should bless her yearning eyes, and fair as in the days of childish glee its grassy nook and wooded haunt should be. Yet ever as one sorrow passed away, another called the tender one to stay, and where so late shared the bright glad mirth, the phantom grief sat cowering at the hearth. So days and weeks passed on and grew to years, unwept by Mary save for other tears, as fond nurse that from the mother breast lulls the tired infant to its quiet rest. First stills each sound, then lets the curtain fall to cast dim and sleepy light o'er all. So age drew gently o'er each wearied sense, a deepening shade to smooth the parting hence. Each cherished accent, each familiar tone fell from her daily music one by one. Still her attentive looks could rightly guess what moving lips by sound could not express. O'er each loved face next came a filmy veil, and shine and shadow from her sight did fail. And last of all the solemn change they saw, depriving death of half his regal awe. The mind sank down to childishness, and they, relying on her counsel day by day, as some lone wanderer from his home afar takes for his guide some fixed and well-known star, till clouds come wafting o'er its trembling light, and leave him wildered in the pathless night, sought her changed face with strange uncertain gaze, still praying her to lead them through the maze. They pitied her lone fate, and deemed it sad, yet as in early childhood she was glad. No sense had she of change or loss of thought, with those around her no communion sought. Scarcely knew she of her being, fancy wild had placed her in her father's house a child. It was her mother sang to her to rest, the lark awoke her, springing from his nest. The bees sang cheerily the livelong day, lurking mid flowers wherever she did play. The Sabbath bells rang as in years gone by, swelling and falling on the soft wind's sigh. Her little sisters knell with her in pair, and nightly did her father's blessing share. So wrapped in glad imaginings her life stole on with all her sweet young memories rife. I often think, if by this mortal light we e'er can read another's lot aright, that for her loving heart a blessing came, unseen by many, clouded by a name, and all outward fading from the world was like the flower at night when it has furled its golden leaves and lapped them round its heart, to nestle closer in its sweetest part. Yes, angel voices called her childhood back, blotting out life with its dim sorrowy track. Her secret wish was e'er known in heaven, and so in mystery was the answer given. And sadness many mourned her latter years, but blessings shone beyond that mist of tears. And as the child she deemed herself, she lies in gentle slumber till the dead shall rise. And that ran a bit to the long, but I think it was quite a good one, so I hope you will forgive the indulgence. At any rate, let me change the microphone back, and we'll get started, shall we? Nazca, good timing. We've just finished with our poetry and are about to begin on the book. And there we are. Right. Yes. Once again, congratulations to Player Who on getting first this week. We do appreciate it. But yeah, you should still have a little bit of time left if you want to wager on whether I'm going to finish the book in in one sitting or not. So feel free to get those guesses in if you want to make them. I'll have a quick swallow of water and then we'll begin with our average or our normal book reading. I appreciate that, but at the same time, do feel free. I strongly encourage it. Mostly I just want to have a reason to use the little feature. It seems like a fun one. I feel bad that I don't use it more. But yeah. For anyone who is interested in gambling, I will reinstate. Today we're going to attempt to read Mr. Harrison's Confessions by Elizabeth Gaskell, which is a novel. Not a long novel, but a novel indeed. It measures just shy of 80 pages at 72, of quite dense type. And we're going to attempt to finish it all in a single setting. I expect it to take around about 4 hours, which again wouldn't be the longest I've ever gone, but I have failed on shorter things before. So if you have a bet that you would like to make, do feel free. And if you don't want to, that's also fine. I'm giving you the option. Anyway, what are we about? Yes. So as always, if at any point during this reading you should miss something that I've said, either due to my own poor diction, some error of technological nature, or just because you've been distracted by one of the sad realities of real life, keeping you away from things, do feel free to let me know. I'm happy to repeat myself, so you don't miss anything. If you have thoughts, comments, or questions, also let me know. I'm happy to stop and have a chat, if it's a quick one. This book, I believe, is broken down into... I believe in the chapters, I might be wrong. Broken down into at least sections, maybe not chapters, but yeah, broken down into parts. So if you have a longer question, I'll probably wait till the end of a section and we'll have a little bit of a chinwag about it then when I stop to have my drink. Otherwise, I'm happy to have a quick comment in the middle of a thing. I'm always happy to hear from you, so do feel free, please, to give me a bell if you want to. Other than that, though, I don't have anything else to say. So unless you've got redeems you'd like to pull on, which I will give you a chance to do as I can have a quick drink of water here. That being the case, you got about 5 minutes to get bits in, otherwise, without any further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, I shall begin. Mr. Harrison's Confessions. 1. The fire were burning gaily. My wife had just gone upstairs to put the baby to bed. Charles sat opposite me, looking very brown and handsome. But pleasant enough that we should feel sure of spending some weeks under the same roof, a thing which we had ne'er done since we was mere boys. I felt too lazy to talk, so I ate walnuts and looked into the fire. But Charles grew restless. Now that your wife has gone upstairs, Will, you must tell me what I've wanted to ask you since I saw her this morning. Tell me all about the wooing and winning. I want to have the receipt for getting such a charming little wife of my own. Your letters only gave the barest details. So set to, man, and tell me every particular. If I tell you all, it'll be a long story. Never fear. If I get tired, I can go to sleep and dream that I'm back again with a lonely bachelor in Ceylon, and I can waken up when you're done to know what I am under your roof. Dash away, man. Once upon a time, a gallant young bachelor. There's the beginning for you. Well then, once upon a time, a gallant young bachelor was sorely puzzled where to settle when he had completed his education as a surgeon. I must speak in the first person, I cannot go on as a gallant young bachelor. I had just finished walking the hospital when you went to Ceylon, and if you remember, I wanted to go abroad, like you. I thought of offering myself as a ship surgeon, but I found I should rather lose caste in my profession. So I hesitated, and while I was hesitating, I received a letter from my father's cousin, Mr. Morgan. Now, that old gentleman who used to write such long letters of good advice to my mother, and who tipped me a £5 note when I agreed to be bound apprentice to Mr. Howard instead of going to sea. Well, it seems the old gentleman had all along thought of taking me as his partner, if I turned out pretty well, and as he had heard good account of me from an old friend of his who was a surgeon at Guy's, he wrote to propose this arrangement. I was to have a third of the profits for 5 years, after that half, and eventually I was to succeed to the whole. It was no bad offer for a penniless man like me, as Mr. Morgan had capital country practice, and, though I did not know him personally, I had formed a pretty good idea of him as an honourable, kind-hearted, fidgety, meddlesome old bachelor, and as a very correct notion it was, as I found out in the very first half hour of seeing him. I had some idea that I was to live in his house, as he was a bachelor and kind of family friend, and I think he was afraid that I should expect this arrangement. When I walked up to his door with the porter carrying my portmanteau, he met me on the steps, and while he held my hand and shook it, he said to the porter, Jerry, if you'll wait a moment, Mr. Harrison would be ready to go with you to these lodgings at Jocelyn's, you know. Then turning to me, he addressed his first words of welcome. I was little inclined to think him inhospitable, but I got to understand him better afterwards. Jocelyn's, said he, is the best place I have been able to hit up in a hurry, and there is a good deal of fever about, which made me desirous that you should come this month. A low kind of typhoid in the oldest parts of the town. I think you'll be comfortable there for a week or two. I've taken the liberty of desiring my housekeeper to send down 1 or 2 things which give the place a little more of a home aspect. An easy chair, a beautiful case of preparations, and 1 or 2 little matters in the way of a stable, of eatables. But if you'll take my advice, I have a plan in my head which we'll talk about tomorrow morning. At present, I don't like to keep you standing out on the steps here, so I'll not detain you from your lodgings, for I rather think my housekeeper is going to get tea ready for you. I thought I understood the old gentleman's anxiety for his own health, which he put upon care for mine, for he had on a kind of loose grey coat, and no hat on his head. But I wonder that he did not ask me indoors, instead of keeping me on the steps. I believe, after all, I made a mistake in supposing you were afraid of taking cold. You were only afraid of being seen in dishabille. And for his apparent inhospitality, I had not been long in Duncombe before I understood the comfort of having one's house considered a castle in which no one might intrude, and saw good reason for the practice. Mr. Morgan had established a coming to his door to speak to everyone. It were only effect of habit that made him receive me so. Before long I had the free run of his house. There was every sign of kind attention and forethought on the part of someone, whom I could not doubt to be Mr. Morgan, in my lodging. I was too lazy to do much that evening, and sat at the little low window which projected over Jocelyn's shop, looking up and down the street. Duncombe calls itself a town, but I should call it a village, really. Looking from Jocelyn's, it is a very picturesque place. The houses are anything but regular. They may be mean in their details, but altogether they look well. They have not that flat, unrelieved front which many towns of far more pretensions present. Here and there a bow window, every now and then a gable, cut up against the sky, occasionally a projecting upper story, throws good effect of light and shadow along the street. And they have a queer fashion of their own, a colour in the whitewash of some houses with a sort of pink blotting paper tinge, more like the stone of which Mayence is built, than anything else. It may be very bad taste, but to my mind it gives a rich warmth to the colouring. Then, here and there, a dwelling house is a court in front, with a grass plot on each side of the flagged walk, and a large tree or two, limes or horse chestnuts, who send their great projecting upper branches over into the street, making round dry places of shelter on the pavement in times of summer showers. While I was sitting in the bow window, thinking of the contrast between this place and the lodgings in the heart of London, which I had left only 12 hours before, the window open here, and although in the centre of town, admitting only sense from the mignotte boxes on the sill instead of the dust and smoke of the street, the only sound heard in this, the principal street, being the voices of mothers calling their playing children home to bed, and the 8 o'clock bell of the old parish church bim-bombing in the remembrance of curfew. While I was sitting thus idly, the door opened, and the little maidservant, dropping a curtsy, said, "Please, sir, Mrs. Munton's compliments, and she would be glad to know how you are after your journey." There, was not that an hearty and kind? Would you even the dearest chum I had at Guy's have thought of doing such a thing? Well, Mrs. Munton, whose name I had never heard of before, was doubtless suffering anxiety till I could relieve her mind by sending back word that I were pretty well. My compliments to Mrs. Munton, and I am pretty well, much obliged to her. It were as well to say, only pretty well, for very well would have destroyed the interest. Mrs. Munton evidently felt in me. Good Mrs. Munton, calm Mrs. Munton, perhaps also young, handsome, rich, widowed Mrs. Munton. I rubbed my hands with delight and amusement, and, resuming my post of observation, began to wonder at which house Mrs. Munton lived. Again the little tap, and the little maidservant. "Please, sir, the Miss Tompkinson's compliments, and they would be glad to know how you feel yourself after your journey." I don't know why, but the Miss Tompkinson's name had not such an halo about her as Mrs. Munton's. Still, it were very pretty, and the Miss Tompkinson descended and inquired. I only wish I did not feel so perfectly robust. I were almost ashamed that I could not send word I were quite exhausted by fatigue, and had fainted twice since my arrival. If I had but had an headache at least. I heaved a deep breath. My chest were in perfect order. I had caught no cold, so I answered again. "Much obliged to Mrs. Tompkinson. I am not much fatigued, tolerably well. My compliments." Little Sally could hardly have got downstairs before she returned, bright and breathless. "Mr. and Mrs. Bullock's compliments, sir, and they hope you are pretty well after your journey." Who would have expected such kindness from such an unpromising name? Mr. and Mrs. Bullock was less interesting, it is true, than their predecessors, but I graciously replied, "My compliments. A night's rest will perfectly recruit me." The same message was presently brought up from one or two more unknown kind hearts. I really wished I were not so ruddy looking. I were afraid I should disappoint the tender-hearted town when they saw what an hale young fellow I were. They were almost ashamed to confess, and had a great appetite for supper when Sally came up to inquire what I would have. Beefsteaks were so tempting, but perhaps I would rather have a water gruel and go to bed. The beefsteak carried the day, however. I need not have felt such a gentle elation of spirits, as this mark of the town's attention is paid to everyone when they arrive after a journey. Many of the same people had sent to inquire after you, great hulking brown fellow as you are, only Sally spared you the infection of devising interesting answers. That's the end of chapter 1. Well then, what is there to say? We find ourselves in the story of a young doctor, or a young surgeon I should say, taking a town post full of very noisy people. So that's interesting. Yeah. Not much to say, but I'll have a quick drink and we'll press on. So, the next morning, Mr. Morgan come before I had finished breakfast. He was the most dapper little man I had ever met. I see the affection which people cling to the style of dress that were in vogue when they was beaux and belles, and receive the most admiration. They are unwilling to believe that their youth and beauty are gone, and think that the prevailing mode is unbecoming. Mr. Morden will inveigh by the hour together against frock coats, for instance, and whiskers. He keeps his chin close shaven, wears a black dress coat, the dark grey pantaloons, and in his morning round into his town patients, he invariably wears the brightest and blackest of Hessian boots, with dangling silk tassels on each side. When he goes home about 10 o'clock to prepare for his ride to see his country patients, he puts on the most dandy top boots I ever saw, which he gets from some wonderful bootmaker 100 miles off. His appearance is what one calls a jemmy. There is no other word that will do for it. He was evidently a little discomfited when he saw me in my breakfast costume, with the habits which I brought with me from the fellows at Guards. My feet against the fireplace, my chair balanced on its hind legs, an habit of sitting which I afterwards discovered he particularly abhorred, slippers on my feet, which also he considered a most ungentlemanly piece of untidiness, out of the bedroom. In short, from what I afterwards learned, every prejudice he had was outraged by my appearance on this first visit of his. I put my book down and sprang up to receive him. He stood hat and cane in hand. I came to inquire if it would be convenient for you to accompany me on my morning's rounds, and be introduced to a few of our friends. I quite detected the little note of coldness induced by his disappointment at my appearance, though he never imagined that we were in any way perceptible. I'll be ready directly, sir, said I, and bolted into my bedroom, only too happy to escape his scrutinising eye. When I returned, I was made aware, by sundry indescribable little coughs and hesitating noises, that my dress did not satisfy him. I stood ready, hat and gloves in hand, but still he did not offer to set out on our round. I grew very red and hot. At length he said, "Excuse me, my dear young friend, but may I ask if you have no other coat besides that? Cutaway, I believe you call them. You're rather sticklers for propriety, I believe, in Duncombe, and much depends on a first impression. Let it be professional, my dear sir, and black is the garb of our profession. Forgive my speaking so plainly, but I consider myself in loco parentis." He was so calm, so bland, and, in truth, so friendly, I felt it would be most childish to take offence, but I had a little resentment in my heart at this way of being treated. However, I mumbled, "Ah, certainly, sir, if you wish it," and returned once more to change my coat, my poor cutaway. These coats, sir, give a man rather too much of a sporting appearance, and not quite befitting the learned professions. More as if you came down here to hunt than to be the Galen or Hippocrates of the neighbourhood. He smiled graciously. So I smothered a sigh, for, to tell you the truth, I'd rather anticipated, and in fact had boasted at Guards, of the runs I hoped to have with the hounds, for Duncombe were famous in the hunting district. All these ideas was quite dispersed when Mr. Morgan let me to the inn yard, whether an horse dealer on his way to a neighbouring fair, and strongly advised me, which in our relative circumstances were equivalent to an injunction, to purchase a little, useful, fast-trotting brown cob instead of a fine showy horse, who would take any fence I put him to, as the horse dealer assured me. Mr. Morgan were evidently pleased when I bowed to his decision, and gave up all hopes of an occasional hunt. We opened out a great deal more after this purchase. He told me his plan of establishing me in an house of my own, which looked more respectable, not to say professional, than being in a lodging, and then he went on to say that he had lately lost a friend, a brother surgeon in a neighbouring town, who had left a widow with a small income, who would be very glad to live with me, and act as mistress to my establishment, whilst less than the expense. She is a ladylike woman, said Mr. Morgan, to judge from the little I have seen of her, about 45 or so, and may really be of some help to you in the little etiquettes of our profession. The slight delicate attentions which every man has to learn if he wishes to get on in life. This is Mrs. Munton, sir, said he, stopping short at a very unromantic-looking green door, with a brass knocker. I had no time to say, "Who is Mrs. Munton?" before we had heard Mrs. Munton was at home, and were following the tidy, elderly servant up the narrow carpeted stair into the drawing-room. Mrs. Munton was the widow of a former vicar, upwards of 60, rather deaf, but, like all deaf people I have ever seen, very fond of talking, perhaps because she knew the subjects which passed out of her grasp when another began to speak. She reeled of a chronic complaint, which often incapacitated her from going out, and the calm people of the town were in the habit of coming to see her, and sitting with her, and bringing her newest, freshest tidbits of news, so that her room was the centre of the gossip of Duncombe. Not a scandal, mind, for I make a distinction between gossip and scandal. Now, you can fancy the discrepancy between the ideal and the real Mrs. Munton, Instead of any foolish notion of a beautiful blooming widow, tenderly anxious about the health of the stranger, I saw an homely, talkative, elderly person with keen, observant eye and marks of suffering on her face, plain in manner and dress, but still unmistakably a lady. She talked to Mr. Morgan, but she looked at me, and I saw that nothing I did escaped her notice. Mr. Morgan annoyed me by his anxiety to show me off. He was kindly anxious to bring out every circumstance to my credit in Mrs. Munton's hearing, knowing well that the town crier had not more opportunities to publish all about me than she had. "What was that remark you repeated to me of Sir Astley Cooper's?" asked he. It was the most trivial speech in the world that I had named as we walked along. I felt ashamed of having to repeat it, but I answered Mr. Morgan's purpose. And before night, all the town had heard that I was a favourite pupil of Sir Astley's. I had never seen him but twice in my life. And Mr. Morgan were afraid that as soon as he knew my full value, I should be retained by Sir Astley to assist him in his duties as surgeon to the royal family. Every little circumstance was pressed into the conversation which could add to my importance. As I once heard Sir Robert Peel remark to Mr. Harrison, the father of our young friend here, the moons in August are remarkably full and bright. If you remember, Charles, my father, was always proud of having sold a pair of gloves to Sir Robert when he was staying at the Grange near Biddicombe, and I suppose good Mr. Morgan had paid his only visit to my father at the time. But Mrs. Munton evidently looked at me with double respect after this incidental remark, which I was amused to meet with a few months afterwards, disguised in the statement that my father was an intimate friend of the Premier's and had in fact been the adviser of most of the measures taken by him in public life. I sat by, half indignant and half amused. Mr. Morgan looked so complacently pleased at the effect of the conversation that I did not care to demur his explanation. And indeed I had little idea at the time how small sayings were the seeds of great events in the town of Duncombe. When we left Mrs. Munton's, he was in a blandly communicative mood. You will find it a curious statistical fact, when 5/6 of our household of a certain rank in Duncombe are women. We have widows and old maids in rich abundance. In fact, my dear sir, I believe that you and I are almost the only gentlemen in the place, Mr. Bullock of course excepted. By gentlemen I mean professional men. It behooves us to remember, sir, that so many of the female sex rely upon us for the kindness and protection which every man who is worthy of the name is always so happy to render. Miss Tompkinson, on whom we next called, did not strike me as remarkably requiring protection from any man. She was a tall, gaunt, masculine-looking woman, with an air of defiance about her. Naturally, this, however, she softened and mitigated, as far as she were able, in favour of Mr. Morgan. He, it seemed to me, stood a little in awe of the lady, who was very brusque and plain-spoken, and evidently piqued herself on her decision of character and sincerity of speech. "So this is the Mr. Harrison we have heard so much of from you, Mr. Morgan? I must say, from what I had heard, that I expected something a little more, He's young yet, he's young. We've all been anticipating an Apollo, Mr. Harrison, and Mr. Morgan's descriptions, and an Asclepius combined into one. Or perhaps I might confine myself to saying Apollo, as he, I believe, was the god of medicine." How could Mr. Morgan have described it without seeing me? I asked myself. Miss Tompkins put on her spectacles and adjusted them on her Roman nose. Suddenly relaxing from her severity of inspection, she said to Mr. Morgan, "But you must see Caroline. I had nearly forgotten it. She's busy with the girls, but I will send for her. She had a bad headache yesterday and looked very pale. Made me very uncomfortable." She rang a bell, and the desired servant to fetch Miss Caroline. Miss Caroline was the youngest sister, younger by 20 years, and so considered as a child by Miss Tompkins, who was 55 at the very least. If she were considered as a child, she was also petted and caressed and cared for as a child, as she had been left as a baby to the charge of her older sister. And when the father died, and they had to set up a school, Miss Tompkinson took upon herself every difficult arrangement, denied herself every pleasure, made every sacrifice in order that Carrie might not feel the change in circumstances. My wife tells me that she once knew the sisters purchased a piece of silk, enough with management to have made 2 gowns, but Carrie wished for flounces or some other such foul lines. Without a word, Miss Tompkinson gave up on her own gown to have an old made up as Carrie wished, in one handsome one, nor an old shabby affair herself as cheerfully as if it were Genoa velvet. That tells the sort of relationship between the sisters, as well as anything, and I consider myself very good to name it thus early, for it was long before I found out Miss Tompkinson's real goodness. We had a great quarrel first. Miss Caroline looked very delicate and dial-away when she come in. She was soft and sentimental as Miss Tompkinson was hard and masculine, and had a way of saying, "Oh, sister, how can you?" at Miss Tompkinson's startling speeches, which I never liked, especially as it were accompanied by a sort of protesting look at the company present, as if she wished to have it understood that she was shocked at her sister's outre manners. Now, we're not such a faithful between sisters. A remonstrance in private might have done good, though for my own part I have grown to like Mr. Tompkinson's speeches and ways. But I don't think like the way some people have of separating themselves from what may be unpopular in their relations. I know I spoke rather shortly to Miss Caroline when she asked me whether I could bear the change from the great metropolis to a little country village. In the first place, why did she not call it London or town and have done with it? In the next place, why should she not love the place which was her own, well enough to fancy that everyone would like it when they come to know it as well as she did? I was conscious I was rather abrupt in my conversation with her, and I saw that Mr. Morgan was watching me. We pretended to be listening to Miss Tompkins' whispered account of her sister's symptoms. When we was once more in the street, he began, "My dear young friend." I winced. For all the morning I had noticed that when he were going to give a little unpalatable advice, he always began with, "My dear young friend." He had done so about the horse. "My dear young friend, there are one or two hints I should like to give you about your manner. The great Sir Everard Home used to say, a general practitioner should either have a very good manner or a very bad one. In the latter case, he must be possessed of talents and acquirements sufficient to ensure his being sought after, whatever his manner might be. But the rudeness will give notoriety to these qualifications. The Abernathy is a case in point. I rather myself question the taste of bad manners. I therefore have studied to acquire an attentive, anxious politeness, which combines ease and grace with tender regard and interest. I am not aware whether I have succeeded, few men do, in coming up to my ideal, but I recommend you to strive after this manner, peculiarly befitting our profession. Identify yourself with your patients, my dear sir. You have sympathy in your good heart, I am sure, to really feel pain when listening to their account of their sufferings, and it soothes them to see the expression of this feeling in your manner. It is, in fact, sir, manners that can make the man in our profession. I don't set myself up as an example, far from it. This is Mr. Huttons, our vicar. One of the servants is indisposed, and I shall be glad of the opportunity of introducing you. We can resume our conversation at another time. I had not been aware that we had been holding a conversation in which, I believe, the assistance of two persons is required. Why had not Mr. Hunton sent to ask after my health on the evening before, according to the custom of the place? I felt rather offended. That's the end of section 2. I'll have a quick swallow of water and then some thoughts. So then, we're beginning to see the makeup of the town. Lots of gossips, lots of interconnection and interest. And of course, apparently a population made up of 5-6 women, which is interesting. But yeah, I'm not sure what I have to say on the matter. Other than obviously there's some very clear kind of oddities that each of these people seems to have. Yeah, we're making good progress. Enjoying it so far. Pressing on. 3. The vicarage are on the north side of the street, at the end opening toward the hills. There were a long low house, receding behind its neighbours, a quarter between the door and the street, with a flag walk and an old stone cistern to the right-hand side of the door. Sallow and seal growing under the windows. Someone watching from behind the window curtain, for the door opened as if by magic as soon as we reached it, and we entered a low room, shelved and all, matted all over with deep, old-fashioned window seats and Dutch tiles in the fireplace. Altogether, it was very cool and refreshing after the hot sun and the white and red street. "Bessie is not so well, Mr. Morgan," said the sweet little girl of 11 or so who opened the door. "Sophie wanted to send for you, but Papa said he was sure you would come soon this morning. Remember that there were other sick people wanting you." "Here's Mr. Morgan, Sophie," she said she, opening the door into an inner room, to which we descended a step, as I remember well, for I was nearly fallen down it. I was so caught up by the picture with him. It was like a picture, at least seen through the door frame. A sort of mixture of crimson and sea green in the room, and a sunny garden beyond. A very low casement window open with the amber air, clusters of white roses peeping in, and Sophie sitting on a cushion on the ground, the light coming from above. On her head, and a little sturdy round-eyed brother kneeling by her, to whom she was teaching the alphabet. It was a mighty relief to him when we come in, as I could see, and I am much mistaken if he were easily caught again to say his lesson, when he was once sent off to find Papa. Sophie rose quietly and, of course, we was just introduced, and that rule before she took Mr. Morgan upstairs to see her sick servant. I was left to myself in the room, and it looked so like an home that it at once made me know the full charm of the word. There was books and work about, and tokens of employment. There were child's playthings on the floor, and against the sea-green walls there hung a likeness or two, done in watercolours. One I was sure was that of Sophie's mother. The chairs and sofa were covered with chintz, and the same as the curtains, a little pretty red rose on a white ground. I don't know where the crimson came from, but I'm sure there were crimson somewhere, perhaps in the carpet. There was a glass door beside the window, and you went up a step into the garden. This was first a grass plot, just under the window, and beyond that straight gravel walks with box borders and narrow flower beds on each side, most brilliant and gay at the end of August, as it were then. And behind the flower borders were fruit trees, trained over woodwork, so as to shut out the beds of kitchen garden within. While I was looking round, a gentleman come in, whom I was sure was the vicar. It was rather awkward, for I had to account for my presence there. I came with Mr. Morgan. My name is Harrison, said I, bowing. I could see we were not much enlightened by this explanation, but we sat down and talked about the time of year or some such small matter, till Sophie and Mr. Morgan come back. Then I saw Mr. Morgan to advantage. With a man whom he respected, as he did the vicar, he lost the prim artificial manner he had in general, and was calm and dignified. Not so dignified as the vicar. I never saw anyone like him. He was very quiet and reserved, almost absent at times. His personal appearance was not striking, but he was altogether a man you would talk to with your hat off whenever you met him. It was his character that produced this effect, a character that you never thought about, but appeared in every word and look and motion. Sophie, said he, and Mr. Morgan looks very warm. Could you not gather a few jargonal pears off the south wall? I fancy there is some ripe there. Our jargonal pears are remarkably elderly this year. Sophie went in the sunny garden, and I saw her rake and tilt at the pears, which was a brother reach, apparently. The parlour had become chilly. I found out afterwards it had a flag floor, which accounted for its coolness, and I thought I should like to go into the warm sun. I said I would go and help the young lady, and without waiting for an answer, I went into the warm scented garden, where the bees was rifling the flowers and making a continual busy sound. I think Sophie had begun to despair of getting the fruit, and was glad of my assistance. I thought I was very senseless to have knocked them down so soon when I found we were to go in as soon as they was gathered. I should have liked to have walked around the garden, but Sophie walked straight off with the pears, and I could do nothing but follow her. She took up her needlework while we ate them. They were very soon finished, and when the vicar had ended his conversation with Mr. Morgan about some poor people, we rose up to come away. I was thankful that Mr. Morgan had said so little about me. I could not endure that he should have introduced Sir Ashley Cooper or Sir Richard Peel at the vicarage, nor yet could I have brought much mention of my great opportunities for acquiring a thorough knowledge of my profession, which I had heard described to Miss Tomkinson while her sister was talking to me. Luckily, however, he spared me all this at the vicar's. When we left, it was time to mount our horses and go to the country rounds, and I was glad of it. And that's the end of chapter 4. Oh, sorry, the end of chapter 3. I often do that when I see the next chapter title. I'm like, yeah, the end of that chapter. End of chapter 3. And we see Sophie, who I believe is the young wife mentioned at the beginning of the story. So you can see how things is going to go along that route. Not much else to say, other than it seems the vicar is something of a standout character even in the stand of other people. Anyway, we'll press on. Ooh. Oh,
Ratfucker 14 has been bound to the library.
Thank you kindly, Ratfucker 14. That is an ominous name given my particular appearance and circumstances. But I do appreciate the follow. Can I press on? 4. By and by, the inhabitants of Duncombe began to have parties in my honour. Mr. Morgan told me it were on my account, or I don't think I should have found it out. He was pleased at every fresh invitation, and rubbed his hands and chuckled as if it were a compliment to himself, as in truth it were. Meanwhile, the arrangement with Mrs. Rose had been brought to conclusion. She would bring her furniture and place it in an house, which I would have paid the rent. She would be the mistress, and, in return, she would not to pay anything for her board. Mr. Morgan took the house, and delighted in advising and setting all my affairs. While partly indolent and partly amused, and altogether passive. The house he took for me was near his own. It had 2 sitting rooms downstairs, opening into each other by folding doors, which were, however, kept shut in general. The back room was my consulting room, the library, he advised me to call it, and he gave me a skull to put on top of my bookcase, in which the medical books was all arranged on the conspicuous shelves. While Miss Austen, Dickens and Thackeray were, by Mr. Morgan himself, skilfully placed in a careless way, upside down or with their backs turned to the wall. The front parlour would be the dining room, and the room above were furnished with Mrs. Rose's drawing room, chairs and table, though I found she preferred sitting downstairs in the dining room close to the window, where, between every stitch, she could look up and see what were going on in the street. I felt rather queer to be the master of this house, filled with another person's furniture, before I had ever seen the lady whose property it were. Presently she arrived. Mr. Morgan met her at the inn where the coach stopped, and accompanied her to my house. I could see them at the drawing-room window, the little gentleman stepping daintily along, flourishing his cane and evidently talking away. She were a little taller than he were, and in deep widow's mourning, such veils and flails and capes and cloaks, that she looked like a black crepe haycock. When we was introduced, she put up her thick veil and looked around and sighed. Your appearance and circumstance, Mr. Harrison, remind me forcibly of the time when I was married to my dear husband, now at rest. He was then like you, commencing a practice as a surgeon. For 20 years I sympathized with him and assisted him by every means in my power, even to making up pills when the young man was out. May we live together in harmony for an equal length of time. May the regard between us be equally sincere, although instead of being conjugal, it is to be material and filial. I'm sure she'd been concocting this speech in the coach, for she afterwards told me she was the only passenger. When she had ended, I felt as if I ought to have had a glass of wine in my hand, to drink after the manner of toasts. Yet I doubt if I should have done it heartily, for I did not hope to live with her for 20 years. It had rather a dreary sound. However, I only bowed and kept my thoughts to myself. I asked Mr. Morgan, while Mrs. Rose was upstairs, taking off her things, to stay to tea, to which he agreed, and kept rubbing his hands with satisfaction, saying, "Very fine woman, sir, a very fine woman. And what a manner! How she will receive patients who may wish to leave a message during her absence. Such a flow of words, to be sure." Mr. Morgan could not stay long after tea, as there were 1 or 2 cases to be seen. I would willingly have gone, and had my hat on indeed for the purpose, when he said it would not be respectful, not the thing, to leave Mrs. Rose the first evening of her arrival. Tender deference to sex, to a widow in the first months of her loneliness, requires a little consideration, my dear sir. I will leave that case at Miss Tompkinson's for you. You will perhaps call early tomorrow morning. And Miss Tompkinson is rather particular, and is apt to speak plainly if she does not think herself properly attended to. I had often noticed that he shuffled off the visits to Miss Tompkinson on me, and I suspected he were a little afraid of the lady. It was rather a long evening with Mrs. Rose. She had nothing to do, thinking it civil, I suppose, to stop in the parlour and not go upstairs and unpack. I begged I might be no restraint upon her if she wished to do so, but, rather than to my disappointment, she smiled in a measured, subdued way, and said it would be a pleasure to her to become better acquainted with me. She went upstairs once, and my aunt misgave me when I saw her coming down with a clean folded pocket handkerchief. Oh, my prophetic soul! She would no sooner see it than she began to give me an account of her late husband's illness and symptoms and death. It were a very common case, but she evidently seemed to think it had been peculiar. She had just a smattering of medical knowledge, and used a technical term so very malapropos that I could hardly keep from smiling. But I would not have done it for the world. She were evidently in such deep and sincere distress. At last she said, "I have the dog nose of my dear husband's complaint in my desk, Mr. Harrison, if you would like to draw up the case for the Lancet. I think he would have felt gratified, poor fellow, if he had been told such a compliment would be paid to his remains, that his case should appear in those distinguished columns." It were rather awkward, for the case were the very commonest, as I said before. However, I have not been even this short time in practice without having learned a few of those noises which do not compromise one, and yet may bear a very significant construction if the listener chooses to exert a little imagination. Before the end of the evening, we were such friends that she brought me down the late Mr. Rose's picture to look at. She told me she could not bear herself to gaze upon the beloved features, but if I would look upon the miniature, she would avert her face. I offered to take it into my own hands, but she seemed wounded at the proposal, and said she never could trust such a treasure out of her own possession. So she turned her head very much over her left shoulder, while I examined the likeness held by her extended right arm. The late Mr. Rose must have been a rather good-looking, jolly man, and the artist had given him such a broad smile and such a twinkle about his eyes that it really were hard to help smiling back at him. However, I restrained myself. At first, Mrs. Rose objected to accepting any of the invitations which were sent to her to accompany me to the tea parties in town. She was so good and simple that I was sure she had no other reason than the one which she alleged, the short time that had lapsed since her husband's death. Or else, now that I had had some experience of the entertainments which she declined so perniciously, I might have suspected she was glad of the excuse. Oh, very good, Abbe. I shall drink on your health, on your account, and Nostrovia to your health. Oh, fair play too then. I shall conclude the rest of this chapter sitting up at my straightest to attention. As you wish, Commandant Abbe. Now where was we? Now that I had had some experience of the entertainments which she denied so perniciously, I might have suspected that she would gladly the excuse. I used sometimes to wish that I were a widow. I come home tired from an hard day's riding, and if I had but felt sure Mr. Morgan would not come in, I should certainly have put on my slippers and my loose morning coat, and have indulged in a cigar in the garden. It seemed a cruel sacrifice to society to dress myself in tight boots and a stiff coat, and go to a 5 o'clock tea. But Mr. Morgan read me such lectures upon the necessity of cultivating the goodwill of the people among whom I was settled, and seemed so sorry and almost hurt when I once complained of the dullness of these parties, that I felt I could not be so selfish as to decline more than 1 out of 3. Mr. Morgan, if he had found out that I had an invitation for the evening, would often take the longer round and the more distant visits. I suspected him at first of the degree, which I confess I often entertained, of shirking the parties, but I soon found out he was really making a sacrifice of his inclinations for what he considered to be my advantage. That's the end of chapter 4. Now have a little swallow of water. So yeah, he's becoming settled in village life. He's got a widow who's just as queer as all the other characters we've met, who's moved in with him. And I've got to admit, it is quite an unsettling idea, moving into an house that is, at least on paper, your own, and that you're paying for, and you're having it be filled with someone else's furniture. I mean, I guess it's not uncommon nowadays to rent a furnished flat, is it? But that's not really someone else's furniture so much as it is furniture that belongs to the place. Whereas the furniture here would have been like the marital furniture of this other family. Seems a little off-putting. I don't know. I mean, I guess this place that I live in is filled with other people's furniture, but they're all dead, so I guess it's my furniture now. Anyhow, we're about to break into the ad break, so I won't drag into the next chapter. To give you an idea of how we're getting on, we are currently 19 pages in to the 78 total, so on pace for about 4 hours, probably slightly less given the poetry reading ahead of time and how things are progressing, so maybe 3.5 hours. I don't believe anyone bothered to wager on the whether I finish. No one did. But it seems pretty likely that I'm going to get it done, so that's nice. I'm feeling good. I'm not going to resolve the 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 wager until it is determined whether I've done it or not, even though no one bet on it, just for my own little perversity. But yeah. Anyway, that's just coming on in 50 seconds. So yeah. What else is there to say on the thing? I've been enjoying it so far. I like I quite like the style of it. It's quite light and playful. Yeah. I think I'm getting on quite well with it. It seems a little lighter than I expected it to be. Being that it is, I think, Regency era roughly. I thought it would be maybe a little bit heavier. Also, in the coming minutes, you should be receiving your little box for a Watcher reward if you've been here the old time, so keep an eye out for that. Oh, I don't know if I told Nasker got in quite late, so I don't know. There are badges around Nasker today. Namely, there are the Doctor's Head mirror for if you're just watching, and then there is a stethoscope for if you want to subscribe, or gift a subscription, whatever. Which again, I don't expect anyone to, but it's there if you want it. And that's ads. So, let's double check. Yeah, 1851, so this is a Regency story. It's a fair bit lighter than the other Regency we've read. Even though I guess that's maybe a little unfair to him. Harem isn't like a heavy story, I don't think of. But it's not light either. There's definitely a bit more involved in this, which is sort of a little more jokey and light-hearted. I'm quite enjoying it. Well, obviously the town is sort of filled with different people. You can see how it's going to sort of develop into, a little community of here and there and tales and this and that. The characters are sort of becoming developed. It's all good fun. Yeah. Trying to think, is there anything else to say, really? I guess it's quite interesting, the sort of, what is it? Medical life that is getting on around here. It puts me in mind of something else I read. I sometimes read things that aren't for the channel, because some books that a lot of books that I find out there, Lamp says aren't good enough to go in the shelves, and so they go in the bad book pile. And some of them I think look interesting, so I'll give them a go in my downtime, which I don't have a lot, but I have some. And there's one I read, I think it was about a vet rather than a doctor, but it puts me in mind of that, the sort of little, they're going around the community stuff, all that sort of thing. You're a country vet. And, there's some Ryan music to come from it. I think this is quite a good time overall. But yeah. What else is there to say? I don't know. Actually, there is one thing I liked, which was the arranging the bookshelf. I found quite amusing. Because obviously he's hiding away the Dickens and the Austen and all that for being, low class sort of, what's the term? Indolent literature, the sort of thing you read in your downtime. It's not very respectable. Because 100 years ago, these were sort of your lowbrow, common person's entertainment. And nowadays, it's just good books that are worthy of respect by Lamp. Who was the other one? I know I've got Austen and Dickens in here, but there was another author mentioned. There was it? See if I can find. I also like the fact that he just got a skull for his bookshelf. Where is it? Oh no, it was there. A skull for the bookshelf. Yeah. Austen, Dickens, and Thackeray. I don't think we've got any Thackeray, but I don't think I know who Thackeray is. So someone to keep an eye out for. Apparently in good company. But yeah, I'll have a quick swallow of water before we get back to it. I should say, I hope you're all enjoying it too. I always talk about my feelings because, what I know, but I'm interested to hear if any of you have any thoughts on that. Do feel free to let me know. But we're back now from the adverts, at least we should be. So, that being the case, let's get back into it, shall we? Chapter 5. One invitation which seemed to promise a good deal of pleasure. Mr. Bullock, who was the attorney at Duncombe, married a second time to a lady from a large provincial town. She wished to lead the fashion, a thing very easy to do, for everyone willing to follow her. So instead of giving a tea party in my honour, she proposed a picnic to some old hall in the neighbourhood, and really the arrangement sounded tempting enough. Every patient we had seemed full of the subject, both those who was invited and those who was not. There were a moan round the houses with a boat on it, and there were a gallery in the hall, from which music sounded delightfully. The family to whom the place belonged were abroad, and lived at a newer and grander mansion when they was alone. There was only a farmer and his wife in the old horn, and they were to have a charge of their preparations. The little kind-hearted town was delighted when the sun shone bright on the October morning of our picnic. The shopkeepers and cottagers all looked pleased as they saw the cavalcade gathering at Mr. Bullock's store. We were somewhere about 20 in number, a silent few she called us, but I thought we was quite enough. There were the Miss Tompkinses, and two of their young ladies. One of them belonged to a country family, as Bullock told me in a whisper. Then come Mr. and Mrs. and Miss Bullock, and a tribe of little children, the offspring of the present wife. Miss Bullock were only a stepdaughter. Mr. Munton had accepted the invitation to join our party, which were rather unexpected by the host and hostess, I imagine, from little remarks that I overheard. They had made her, Mrs. Munton, I should say, but they had made her very welcome. Miss Horseman, a maiden lady who had been on a visit from home till last week, were another. And last there were the vicar and his children. These, with Mr. Morgan and myself, made up the party. I was very much pleased to see something more of the vicar's family. He had come in occasionally at the evening parties, it is true, and spoken kindly to us all, but we were not his having to stay very long at them, and his daughter was, he said, too young to visit. She had had the charge of her little sisters and brothers since her mother's death, which took up a good deal of her time, and she was glad of the evenings to pursue her own studies. But today the case was different, and Sophie and Ellen and Lizzie and even little Walter were all there, standing at Mrs. Bullock's door. For we none of us could be patient enough to sit still in the parlour with Mrs. Munton, the elder ones, quaintly waiting for the two chaises in the spring car, which would have been there by 2 o'clock, and now it was nearly 1:15. Shameful, the brightness of the day would be gone. The sympathetic shopkeepers, standing at their respective doors with their hands in their pockets, had, one and all, their heads turned in the direction from which the carriages, as Mrs. Bullock called them, was to come. There was a rumble along the paved street, and the shopkeepers turned and smiled and bowed their heads congratulatingly to us. All the mothers and the little children of the place stood clustering round the door to set us off. I had my horse waiting, and meanwhile I assisted people into their vehicles. Whilst there's a good deal of management on all such occasions, Mrs. Munton were handing first into one of the chaises, then they were a little hanging back, for most of the young people wished to go in the car. I don't know why. Miss Horseman, however, come forward, and as she was known to be the intimate friend of Mrs. Munton, so far was satisfactory. But who would be third, walking with two old ladies who liked the windows shut? I saw Sophie speaking to Ellen, and then she come forward and offered to be the third. The two old ladies looked pleased and glad, as everyone did near Sophie, so that chairs full were arranged. Just as it was going off, however, a servant from the vicarage come around with a note for her master. When he had read it, he went to the chaise door and I suppose told Sophie, what I afterwards heard him to say to Mrs. Bullock, that the clergyman of a neighbouring parish were ill and unable to read the funeral service for one of his parishioners, who were to be buried that afternoon. The vicar were of course obliged to go, and he said he should not return home that night. It seemed a relief to some, I perceived, to be without the little restraint of his dignified presence. Mr. Morgan come up just at that moment, having ridden hard all morning and being time to join our party, so he was resigned on the whole of the vicar's absence. His own family regretted him the most, I noticed, and I liked them all the better for it. I believe that I come next in being sorry for his departure, but I respected and admired him, and felt always the better for having been in his company. Miss Tompkinson, Mrs. Bullock, and the country young lady were in the next chaise. I think the last would rather have been in the car with the younger and merrier set, but I imagine this was considered in for a dig. The remainder of the party were ride and tar. A most riotous laughing set they were. Mr. Morgan and I were on horseback, at least I led my horse with little Walter riding on him, his fat sturdy legs standing stiff out on each side of my cob's broad back. We were a little dialling and chatted all the way, his sister Sophie being the heroine of all his stories. I found the owed this day's excursion entirely to her begging Papa to let him come. Nurse was strongly against it. Cross old nurse, he called her once, and then said, no, not cross, kind nurse. Sophie tells Walter not to say cross nurse. I never saw seeing a child so brave. We all shied at a log of wood. Walter looked very red and grasped the mane, but sat upright like a little man, and now spoke all the time the horse was dancing. When it were over, he looked at me, and smiled. "You would not let me be hurt, Mr. Harrison, would you? You are the most winning little fellow I ever saw." There was frequent cries to me from the car. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, do get us that branch of blackberries. You can reach it with your whip handle. Oh, Mr. Harrison, there were such splendid nuts on the other side of that hedge. Would you just turn back for them?" Miss Caroline Tompkinson was one or twice rather faint with the mention of the car, and with the motion of the car, and asked me for my smelling bottle, as she had forgotten hers. I was amused at the idea of my carrying such articles about with me. Then she thought she would like the walk, and got out and come on my side of the road. But I found little Walter the pleasant companion, and soon set the horse off into a trot, with which pace a tender constitution could not keep up. The road to the old hall was long and sandy lane, with high edge banks. The wych elms almost met over it. "Shocking farming," Mr. Bullock called out. And so it might be, but it was very pleasant and picturesque looking. The trees was gorgeous in their orange and crimson hues, varied by great dark green holly bushes glistening in the autumn sun. I should have thought the colours too vivid if I had seen them in a picture, especially when we wound up the brow after crossing the little bridge over the brook. What laughing and screaming there were as the cart splashed through the sparkling water, and I caught the purple hills beyond. We could see the old hall too, from the point with its warm rich woods bellowing up behind, and the blue waters of the moat lying still under the sunlight. Laughing and talking is very hungry work, and there were a universal petition for dinner when we arrived at the lawn before the hall, where it had been arranged that we were to dine. I saw Miss Carey take Miss Tompkinson aside and whisper to her, and presently the elder sister come up to me where I was busy, rather apart, making a seat of hay, which I had fetched from the farmer's loft for my little friend Walter, who, I had noticed, were rather hoarse, and for whom we were afraid of a seat on the grass, dry as it appeared to be. "Mr. Harrison, Caroline tells me she's been feeling very faint, and she is afraid of a return of one of her attacks. She says she has more confidence in your medical powers than in Mr. Morgan's. I should not be sincere if I did not say that I differ from her, but as it is so, may I beg you to keep an eye on her? I tell her she had better not have come if she did not feel well. The poor girl should set her heart upon this dread pleasure. I have offered to go home with her, but she says if she can only feel sure you're at hand, she would rather stay." "Of course." I bowed and promised all due attendance on Miss Caroline, and in the meantime, until she did require my services, I thought I might as well go help the vicar's daughter, who looked so fresh and pretty in her white muslin dress, here, there, and everywhere, now in the sunshine, now in the green shade, helping everyone to be comfortable, and thinking of everyone but herself. Presently Mr. Morgan come up. "Miss Caroline does not feel quite well. I have promised your services to her sister." "So have I, sir. Miss Sophie cannot carry this heavy basket." I did not mean her to have heard this excuse, but she caught it up and said, "Oh, yes, I can. I can take the thing out one by one. Go to poor Miss Caroline, pray, Mr. Harrison." I went, but very unwillingly, I must say. When I had once seated myself by her, I think she must have felt better, and probably only a nervous fear, which were relieved when she knew she had assistance near at hand. But she made a capital dinner. I thought she would never end her modest request for just a little more pigeon pie, or a merry thought of chicken. That's no phrase. Such an hearty meal would, I hope, effectively revive her, and so it did. For she told me she thought she could manage to walk around the garden and see the old peacock views, if I would kindly give her my arm. It was very provoking. I had so set my hopes upon being with the vicar's children. I advised Miss Caroline strongly to lie down a little and rest before tea on the sofa in the farmer's kitchen. You cannot think how persuasively I begged her to take care of herself. At last she consented, thanking me for my tender interest. She should never forget my kind attention to her. She little knew what were in my mind at the time. However, she was safely consigned to the farmer's wife, and I was rushing out in search of a white gown and a waving figure when I encountered Mrs. Bullock at the door of the hall. She was a fine, fierce-looking woman. I thought she had appeared a little displeased at my unwilling attentions to Miss Caroline at dinner time, but now, seeing me alone, she was all smiles. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, all alone? How is that? What are the young ladies about to allow such childishness? And by the way, I have left a young lady who will be very glad of your assistance, I'm sure. My daughter Jemima, her step-daughter, she meant. Mr. Bullock is so particular and so tender a father that he would be frightened to death at the idea of her going into the boat on the moat, unless she were with someone who could swim. He has gone to discuss the new wheeled plough with the farmer. You know agriculture is his hobby. The law. Horrid law is his business. But the poor girl is pining on the bank, longing for my permission to join the others, which I dare not give, unless you will kindly accompany her and promise, if any accident happens, to preserve her safe. Oh, Sophie, why was no one anxious about you? That's the end of Check the Five. What's the phrase? A comedy of errors? Yeah. I have a quick swallow of water. The pains of being a promising young doctor in a small town filled with eligible young women. And I have a crush on the only one who's not particularly aware of your presence. For shame. For horror. Right then. But pressing on. 6. Miss Bullock was standing by the waterside, looking wistfully, as I thought, at the water party. The sound of whose merry laughter come pleasantly enough from the boat, which lay off, for indeed no one knew how to row, and she were of a clumsy flat-bottomed build, about 100 yards, weather-bound, as they shouted out, among the long stalks of the water lilies. Miss Bullock did not look up till I come close to her, and then, when I told her my errand, she lifted up her great heavy sour eyes and looked at me for a moment. It struck me at the time that she expected to find some expression on my face, which were not there, and that its absence were a relief to her. She were a very pale, unhappy-looking girl, but very quiet, and, if not agreeable in manner, at any rate, not forward or offensive. I called to the party in the boat, and they come slowly enough through the large, cool, green lily leaves towards us. When they got near, we saw there were no room for us, and Miss Bullock said she would rather stay in the meadow and sort her about, if I would go into the boat, and I am certain from the look in her countenance that she spoke the truth. Miss Osmond called out in a sharp voice, while she smiled in a very disagreeable, knowing way, "Oh, Mamma will be displeased if you don't come in, Miss Bullock, after all her trouble in making such a nice arrangement." At this speech the poor girl hesitated, and at last, in an undecided way, as if she were not sure whether she were doing right, she took Sophie's place in the boat. Ellen and Lizzie landed with their sister, so that there were plenty of room for Miss Tompkinson, Miss Osmond, and all the little Bullocks, and the 3 vicarage girls went off strolling along the meadow side, and playing with water, who were in a high state of excitement. The sun was getting low, but the declining light was beautiful upon the water, and, to add to the charm of the time, Sophie and her sisters, standing on the green lawn in front of the hall, struck up the little German canon, which I had never heard before. O wie ist mir an Edblind, etc. At last we were someone that tugged the boat to the landing step on the lawn, tea and a blazing wood fire being ready for us in the hall. I were offering my arm to Miss Osmond, as she were a little lame, when she said again, in a particular disagreeable way, "Had you not better take Miss Bullock, Mr. Harrison? It will be more satisfactory." I helped Miss Osmond up the steps, however, and then she repeated her advice, so, remembering that Miss Bullock were in fact the daughter of my entertainers, I went to her. But though she accepted my arm, I could perceive she was very sorry that I had offered it. The hall were lighted by the glorious wood fire and the wide old grate. The daylight was dying away in the west, and the large windows admitted but a little of what were left, through their small leather frames, coats of arms emblazoned upon them. The farmer's wife had set out a great long table, which were piled with good things, and a huge black kettle sang on the glowing fire, which sent a cheerful warmth through the room as it crackled and blazed. Mr. Morgan, whom I found had been taking a little round in the neighbourhood among his patients, were there, smiling and rubbing his hands as usual. Mr. Bullock were holding a conversation with the farmer at the garden door on the nature of different manures, in which it struck me that if Mr. Bullock had the fine names and theories on his side, the farmer had all the practical knowledge and the experience, and I know which I would have trusted. I think Mr. Bullock rather liked to talk about Liebig in my hearing. He sounded well and were knowing. Mrs. Bullock were not particularly placid in her mood. In the first place, I wanted to sit by the vicar's daughter, and Miss Caroline, as I decidedly wanted to sit on my other side, being afraid of her fainting fits, I imagine. But Mrs. Bullock called me to a place near her daughter. Now I thought I had done enough civility to a girl who were evidently annoyed rather than pleased by my attentions, and I pretended to be busy snooping under the table for Miss Caroline's gloves, which was missing. But it were of no avail. Mrs. Bullock's fine, severe eyes was awaiting my reappearance, and she summoned me again. "I am keeping this place in my right hand for you, Mr. Harrison. Jemima, sit still." I went up to the post of honour and tried to busy myself with pouring out coffee to hide my chagrin. But after forgetting to empty the water, put in to warm the cups, Mrs. Bullock said, and omitting to add any sugar, the lady told me she would dispense with my services and turn me over to my neighbour on the other side. Talking to the younger lady was no doubt more Mr. Harrison's vocation than assisting the elder one. I dare say it were only the manner that made the word seem offensive. Mrs. Horsman sat opposite to me, smiling away. Miss Bullock did not speak, but seemed more depressed than ever. At length, Miss Horsman and Miss Bullock got a war of innuendos, which were completely unintelligible to me, and were very much displeased with my situation, while, at the bottom of the table, Mr. Morgan and Mr. Bullock were making the young ones laugh most heartily. Part of the joke was Mr. Morgan insisted upon making tea at the end, and Sophie and Ellen were busy contriving every possible mistake for him. I thought honour were a very good thing, but merriment a better. Here were I in the place of distinction, hearing nothing but cross words. At last the time came for us to go home. As the evening was damp, the seats in the chaises were the best and most to be desired. And now Sophie offered to go in the car, only she seemed anxious, and so was I, that water should be secured from the effects of the white reefs of fog rolling up from the valley. But the little violent, affectionate fellow would not be separated from Sophie. She made a nest for him on her knee in one corner of the car, and covered him with her own shawl, and I hoped that he would take no harm. Miss Tompkinson, Miss Bullock, and some of the younger ones walked, but I seemed to chain the windows of the chaise. Miss Caroline begged me not to leave her, as she was dreadfully afraid of robbers, and Mrs. Bullock implored me to see that the man did not overturn them in the bad roads, as he had certainly had too much to drink. I had become so irritable before I reached home that I thought it was a most disagreeable day of pleasure I had ever had, and could hardly bear to answer Mrs. Rose's never-ending questions. She told me, however, that from my account the day was so charming that she thought she should relax in the rigour of her seclusion, and mingle a little more in the society of which I gave so tempting a description. She really thought her dear Mr. Rose would have wished it, and his will should be laudable after his death, as it had ever been during his life. In compliance, therefore, with his wishes, she would even do a little violence to her own feelings. She was very good and very kind, not merely attentive to everything which she thought could conduce to my comfort, but willing to take any trouble in providing the broths and nourishing food which I often found it convenient to order under the name of kitchen physic, and my poorer patients. And I really did not see the use of her shutting herself up in mere compliance with an etiquette, when she began to wish to mix in the little quiet society of Duncombe. Accordingly, I urged her to begin the visit, and even when applied to as what I imagined the late Mr. Rose's wishes on that subject would have been, I answered for that worthy gentleman, and assured his widow that I was convinced he would have regretted deeply had given way to immoderate grief, would have been rather grateful than otherwise, seeing her endeavour to divert her thoughts by a few quiet visits. She had cheered up and said, as I really thought so, she would sacrifice her own inclinations and accept the very next invitation that came. And that's the end of chapter 6. So then, one young woman who is intent on attracting the doctor's attention with fainting fits and spells of weakness, so he can step in and rescue her. One young woman who has been pressed upon him by their family. And another young woman in whom he is interested, and who is doing nothing but caring for her family and being the most agreeable young person in such a way that completely thwarts his attempts at getting to know her. I can see where things are leading, at least a little bit. And it would seem that such a party is a very annoying thing indeed, at least in my mind. Still, they're pressing on. 7. I was roused from my sleep in the middle of the night by a messenger from the vicarage. Little Walter had got the croup, and Mr. Morgan had been sent into the country. I dressed myself hastily and went through the quiet little street. There were a light burning upstairs at the vicarage. You were in the nursery. The servant who opened the door the instant I knocked were crying sadly. I could hardly answer my inquiries as I went upstairs, 2 steps at a time, to see my little favourite. The nursery was a great large room. At the farther end it was lighted by a common candle, which left the other end, where the door was, in shade. So I suppose the nurse did not see me come in, for she was speaking very crossly. "Miss Sophie," said she, "I told you over and over again it was not fit for him to go with the hoarseness that he had, and you would take him. It will break your papa's heart, I know, but it's none of my doing." Whatever Sophie felt, she did not speak in answer to this. She was on her knees by the warm bath, in which the little fellow was struggling to get his breath, with a look of terror on his face that I have often noticed in young children when smitten by sudden and violent illness. It seems as if they recognised something something infinite and invisible, how those bids the pain and the anguish come, from which no love can shield them. It is a very heart-rending look to observe, because it comes on the faces of those who are too young to receive comfort from the words of faith or the promises of religion. Walter had his arms tight round Sophie's neck, as if she, of the two, were his paradise angel, could save him from the dread shadow of death. Yes, death. I knelt down by him on the other side and examined him. The very robustness of his little frame gave violence to the disease, which is always one of the most fearful by which children of his age can be attacked. "Don't tremble, Watty," said Sophie in a soothing tone. "It's Mr. Harrison, darling, who'll let you ride on his horse." I could detect the quavering in the voice, which she tried to make so calm and soft to quiet the little fellow's fears. We took him out of the bath, and I went for the leeches. While I were away, Mr. Morgan come. He loved the vicarage children as if he were their uncle, but he stood still and aghast at the sight of Walter, so lately bright and strong, and now hurrying along to the awful change. The silent, mysterious land where, tended and cared for as he had been on earth, he must go alone. The little fellow, the darling. He applied the leeches to his throat. He resisted at first, but Sophie, God bless her, put the agony of her grief on one side, and thought only of him, and began to sing the little songs he loved. We was all still. The gardener had gone to fetch the vicar. He was 12 miles off. We doubted if he would come in time. I don't know if they had any hope, but the first moment Mr. Morgan's eyes met mine, I saw that he, like me, had none. The tick of the house clock sounded through the dark, quiet house. Walter was sleeping now, with the black leeches hanging onto his fair white throat. Still Sophie went on singing little lullabies, which she had sung under far different and happier circumstances. I remember one verse, because it struck me at the time as strangely applicable. "Sleep, baby, sleep, thy rest shall angels keep, while on the grass the lamb shall feed, and never suffer want or need. Sleep, baby, sleep." The tears was in Mr. Morgan's eyes. I do not think either he or I could have spoken in our natural tones, but the brave girl went on, clear though low. She stopped at last and looked up. "He is better, is he not, Mr. Morgan?" "No, my dear. He is..." He could not speak all at once, and he said, "My dear, he will be better soon. Think of your mamma, my dear Miss Sophie. She will be very thankful to have one of her darlings safe with her, where she is." Still she did not cry, but she bent her head down on the little face and kissed it long and tenderly. "I will go for Helen and Lizzie. They will be sorry not to see him again." She rose up and went for them. Poor girls, they come in their dressing gowns, with eyes dilated with sudden emotion, pale with terror, stealing softly along as if sound could disturb them. Sophie comforted them by gentle caresses. They were over soon. Mr. Morgan was fairly crying like a child, but he thought it necessary to apologise to me for what I honoured him for. "I am a little overdone by yesterday's work, sir. I have had 1 or 2 bad nights, and they rather upset me. When I was your age, I was as strong and manly as anyone, and would have scorned to shed tears." Sophie came up to where we stood. "Mr. Morgan, I'm so sorry for Papa. How shall I tell him? She was struggling against her own grief for her father's sake. Mr. Morgan often knew her wait is going home, and she seemed thankful for the proposal. I, new friend, almost stranger, might stay no longer. The street was quiet as ever, not a shadow had changed, for it was not yet 4 o'clock, but during the night a soul had departed. From all I could see, and all I could learn, the vicar and his daughters strove, which should comfort the other the most. Each thought of the other's grief, each prayed for the other rather than for themselves. We saw them walking out country woods, and we heard of them in the cottages of the poor. It was some time before I happened to meet either of them again, and then I felt, from something indescribable in their manner towards me, that I was one of the peculiar people whom death had made dear. That one day at the old hall had done this. I were perhaps the last person who had given the little fellow any unusual pleasure. Poor Walter. I wish I could have done more to make his short life happy. That's the end of chapter 7. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, well there goes our funny little story. Fucking hell, right. Should have remembered this is a medical drama in the time before medicine was any good. Fuck. Excuse me, I'll have another drink. That's a little bit harrowing, isn't it? Christ. Don't really know what to say to that. Yeah. Rest in peace, Walter, I suppose. God. That's very grim indeed. It sort of came out, I guess there was the hint in the last chapter of them worrying about him catching cold from the transportation. But God. That's a bit grim, isn't it, Lord? What else is there to say? I suppose it's notable that Mr. Morgan... I suspect him crying is probably quite a big deal given the sort of time period and how he apologises for it. That's probably an even more striking emotional moment back in the day. But, yeah. I'm trying to think what else I can say about the things, but, yeah, I don't think there's much else to say really on the matter, just... Sudden tonal shift, right, well... No sense dwelling on it, let's press on, I suppose. 8. There were a little lull out of respect to the vicar's grief and the visit in. He gave time to Mrs. Rose to soften down the anguish of her weeds. At Christmas, Miss Tompkins sent out an invite for a pie. Miss Caroline had once or twice apologised to me because such an event had not taken place before, but as she said, the avocations of their daily life prevented their having such little reunions except in the vacations. And sure enough, as soon as the holidays begun, came the civil little note. Mrs. Tompkins requested pleasure in Mrs. Rose's and Mr. Harrison's company at tea on the evening of Monday the 23rd inst. Tea at 5 o'clock. Mrs. Rose's spirit roused, like a war horse at the sound of the trumpet at this. She was not of a repining disposition, but I do think she believed the party-given population of Duncombe had given up inviting her, as soon as she had determined to relent, accept the invitations in compliance with the late Mr. Rose's wishes. Such snippings of white love ribbon as I found everywhere making the carpet untidy. One day too, unluckily, a small box was brought to me by mistake. I did not look at the direction, for I never doubted it was some hyoscyamus which I were expecting from London. So I tore it open and saw inside a piece of paper with "No more grey hair" in large letters upon it. I folded it up in a hurry and sealed it afresh and gave it to Mrs. Rose. I could not refrain from asking her soon after if she could recommend to me anything to keep my hair from turning grey, and that I thought prevention were better than cure. I think she made out the impression of my seal on the paper after that, for I learned that she had been crying, and she talked about there being no sympathy left in the world for her since Mr. Rose's death, and she counted the days until she could rejoin him in the better world. I think she counted the days to Miss Tompkins' party too. She thought so much about it. The covers were taken off Miss Thompson's chairs, and curtains and sofas. A great jar full of artificial flowers were placed in the centre of the table, which, as Miss Caroline told me, were all her doing, as she doted on the beautiful and artistic in life. Miss Tompkinson stood erect as a grenadier, close by the door, receiving her friends and heartily shaking them by the hand as they entered. She said she was truly glad to see them, and so she really were. We had just finished tea, and Miss Caroline had brought out a little pack of conversations cards, sheaves of slips of cardboard with intellectual or sentimental questions on one set, and equally intellectual and sentimental answers on the other. And as the answers were fit to any, and all of the questions, you may think they were a characterless and worse set of things. I had just been asked by Miss Caroline, "Can you tell what those dearest do you think of you at this present time?" And I answered, "How can you expect me to reveal such a secret to the present company?" When the servant announced that a gentleman, a friend of mine, wished to speak to me downstairs. "Oh, show him up, Martha, show him up," said Miss Tompkin in her hospitality. "Any friend of our friends is welcome," said Miss Caroline, in an insinuating tone. I jumped up, however, thinking it might be someone on some business. But I was so penned in by the spider-legged tables stuck out on every side, that I could not get the haste I wished, and before I could prevent it, Martha had shown up. Jack Marshland. He was on his road home for a day or two at Christmas. He came up in an hearty way, bowing to Miss Tompkinson, and explaining that he had found himself in my neighbourhood, and had come over to pass a night with me, and that my servant had directed him where I were. His voice, loud at all times, sounded like Stempler's, in that little room, where he always spoke in a kind of purring way. He had no swell in his tones. They were forte from the beginning. At first it seemed like the days of my youth come back again, to hear full manly speaking. I felt proud of my friend, as he thanked Miss Tompkinson for her kindness in asking him to stay the evening. By and by he came up to me, and I dare say he thought he had lowered his voice, for he looked as if speaking confidentially, while in fact the whole room might have heard him. "Frank, my dear boy, when shall we have dinner at this good old lady's? I am deuced hungry." "Dinner? Why, we had tea an hour ago." While he yet spoke, Martha come in with a little tray, on which were a single cup of coffee and 3 slices of wafer bread and butter. His dismay, and his evident submission to the decrees of fate, tickled me so much that I thought he should have a further taste of the laugh I led from month's end to month's end, and I gave up my plan of taking a moment once, and enjoyed the anticipation of the hearty laugh we should have together at the end of the evening. I was famously punished for my determination. "Shall we continue our game?" asked Miss Caroline, but never relinquish her sheaf of questions. We went on questioning and answering with a little gain of information at either party. "No such thing as a heavy betting in this game, eh, Frank?" asked Jack, who had been watching us. "You don't lose £10 at a sitting, I guess, as you used to do at Short's. Playing for love, I suppose you'd call it." Miss Caroline simpered and looked down. Jack were not thinking of her. He were thinking of the days when he had at the Mermaid's. He were thinking of the days we had at the Mermaid. Suddenly he said, "Where were you this day last year, Frank?" "Don't remember," said I. "And I'll tell you. It's the 23rd, the day you were taken up for knocking down the fellow in Long Acre, and that I had to bail you out ready for Christmas Day. We're in more agreeable quarters tonight." He did not intend with this reminiscence to be heard. We were not in the least put out when Miss Tompkinson, with a face of dire surprise, asked, "Mr. Harrison taken up, sir?" "Oh, yes, ma'am. And you see it was so common an affair with him to be locked up that he can't remember the dates of his different imprisonments." He laughed heartily, and so should I, but I saw the impression it made. The thing were, in fact, simple enough, and capable of easy explanation. I had been made angry by seeing a great hulking fellow, out of mere wantonness, break the crutch from under a cripple, and I struck the man more violently than I intended, and down he went, yelling out for the police, and I had to go before a magistrate to be released. I disdained giving this explanation at the time. It was no business of theirs, what I had been doing a year ago, but still, Jack might have held his tongue. However, that unruly member of his was set a-going, and he told me afterward he was resolved to let the old ladies into a little laugh, and accordingly he remembered every practical joke we had ever had, and talked and laughed and roared again. I tried to converse with Miss Caroline, Mrs. Munton, anyone, but Jack was the hero of the evening, and everyone were listening to him. "Then he has never sent any hoaxing letters since he came here, has he? Good boy. He's turned over a new leaf. He was the deepest dog that I ever met with. Such anonymous letters he used to send. Do you remember that one to Mrs. de Walbrook, eh, Frank? That was too bad. The wretch were laughing all the time. No, I won't tell about it, don't be afraid. Such a shameful hoax. I was laughing again. Pray do tell, I called out, for he made it seem far worse than it was. Oh, no, no. You've established a better character. I would not for the world nip your budding efforts. You'll bury the past in oblivion. I tried to tell my neighbour the story, to which he alluded. They was attracted by the merriment at Jack's manor, and did not care to hear the plain matter of the fact. Then came a pause. Jack was talking almost quietly to Miss Horseman. Suddenly he called across the room, "How many times have you been out with the hounds? The hedges were blind very late last year, and you must have had some good mild days since." "I've never been out," I said shortly. "Never? Huh! Well, I thought that was the great attraction to Duncombe." Now, was he not provoking? He would condole with me, and fix the subject in the minds of everyone present. The supper trays were brought in, and there were a shuffle of situation. He and I was close together again. "I say, Frank, what will you lay me that I don't clear that tray before people are ready for their second helping? I'm as hungry as a hound." "You'll have a round of beef and a raw leg of mutton when you get home, only do behave yourself here." "Well, for your sake, keep me away from those trays, or I'll not answer for myself. Hold me or I'll fight, as the Irishman said. I'm going to talk to that little old lady in blue, and sit with my back to those ghosts of a tablet, of eatables." He sat down by Miss Caroline, who would not have liked this description of her, and began an earnest, tolerably quiet conversation. I tried to be as agreeable as I could, do away with the impression he had given of me, but I found that everyone drew up a little stiffly at my approach, and did not encourage me to make any remarks. In the middle of my attempts, I heard Miss Caroline beg Jack to take a glass of wine, and I saw him help himself to what appeared to be port, but in an instant he set it down from his lips, exclaiming, "Vinegar, by Jove!" He made the most horribly wry face. Mrs. Thompson came up in a severe hurry to investigate the affair. It turned out it was some blackcurrant wine, on which she particularly piqued herself. I drank 2 glasses of it to ingratiate myself with her, and had testified to its sourness. I don't think she noticed my exertions. She was so much engrossed in listening to Jack's excuses for his malapropos observation. He told her with the gravest face that he had been a teetotaler so long that he had but a confused recollection of the distinction between wine and vinegar, particularly eschewing the latter, because it had been twice fermented, and he had imagined Miss Caroline had asked him to take a toast in water, where he should never have touched the decanter. That's the end of chapter 8. And the stories grow and they spin out of control, eh? I have a quick swallow of water. And we press on. Chapter 9. As we was walking home, Jack said, "Lord, Frank, I've had such fun with this little lady in blue. I told her you wrote to me every Saturday telling me the events of the week. Should to call in." He stopped to laugh, for he bubbled and chuckled so that he could not laugh and walk. "And I told her you were deeply in love," another laugh, "and that I could not get you to tell me the name of the lady, but she had light brown hair." In short, I drew from life, and gave her an exact description of herself, and that I was most anxious to see her and implore her to be merciful to you, that you were a most timid, faint-hearted fellow with women. He laughed till I thought he would have fallen down. I begged her if she could guess who it was from my description. I'll answer for it she did. I took care of that, for I said you described a mole on the left cheek in the most poetical way, saying Venus had pinched it out of envy at seeing anyone more lovely. Oh, hold me up or I shall fall. Laughing and hunger make me so weak. Well, I say I begged her if she knew who your fair one could be, to implore her to save you. I said I knew one of your lungs had gone after a foremost unfortunate love affair, and I could not answer for the other if the lady were cruel. She spoke of a respirator, but I told her that might do very well for the odd lung, but would administer to a heart diseased. I really did talk fine. I found out the secret of eloquence. It's believing what you've got to say. And I worked myself up well with a fancying you've married to the little lady in blue. I got to laughing at last, angry as I had been. His imprudence was irresistible. Mrs. Rose had come home in the sedan and gone to bed. and he and I sat up over the round of beef and brandy and water till 2 o'clock in the morning. He told me I got quite into the professional way of mousing about a room and mewing and purring accordingly as my patient was ill or well. He mimicked me and made me laugh at myself. He left early the next morning. Mr. Morgan come at his usual hour. He and Marston would never have agreed. I should have been uncomfortable to see two friends of mine disliking and despising each other. Mr. Morgan were ruffled, but with his differential manner to women, he smoothed himself down before Mrs. Rose. Regretted that he had not been able to come to Miss Tompkins the evening before, and consequently had not seen her in the society she was so well calculated to adorn. But when we was by ourselves, he said, "I was sent for to Mrs. Muggins this morning. The old spasms. I ask what the story is she tells me about prison, in fact. I trust, sir, she has made some little mistake, that it was an unfounded report. You could not get it out, that you were in Newgate for 3 months." I burst out laughing. The story had grown like a mushroom indeed. Mr. Morgan looked grave. I told him the truth, still he looked grave. "I have no doubt, sir, that you acted rightly. It has an awkward sound. I imagine from your hilarity just now that there was no foundation whatever for the story. Unfortunately, there is. I was only a night at the police station. I'll go there again for the same cause, sir. Very fine spirit, sir. Quite like Don Quixote. Don't you see you might as well have been to the husks at once, or been to the hulks at once? No, sir, I don't. Take my word. Before long the story will have grown to that. No, but we won't anticipate evil. Men's concierity, remember, is the great thing. But I regret is that it may require some short time to overcome a little prejudice, which the story may excite against you. No, but we won't dwell on it. Men's concierity. Don't think about it, sir. It was clear that you were thinking a good deal about it. That's the end of chapter 9. And I'll have a quick swallow of water. Small town folk and their little rooms, eh? I mean, really, who hasn't been in some trouble with the law? You're not really living if you don't occasionally get into a little bit of trouble, eh? Anyhow, pressing on. 10. 2 or 3 days before this time, I had an invitation from the Bullocks to dine with them on Christmas Day. Mrs. Rose was going to spend the week with friends in the town where she formerly lived, and I'd been pleased at the notion of being received into a family, and of being a little with Mr. Bullock, who struck me as a bluff, good-hearted fellow. This Tuesday before Christmas Day, there came an invitation from the vicar to dine there. It was to be only their own family and Mr. Morgan. Only their own family. It was getting to be all the world to me. I was in a passion with myself for having been so ready to accept Mr. Bullock's invitation, coarse and ungentlemanly as he was, with his wife's airs of pretension and Miss Bullock's stupidity. I turned it over in my mind. No, I could not have had a bad headache, which should prevent me going to the place I did not care for, and leave me at liberty to go where I wished. All I could do was to join in the vicarage girls after church and walk by their side in a long country ramble. It was quiet, not sad exactly, but it were evident that the thought of water were in their minds on this day. We went for a copse where there were a good number of evergreens planted as covers for game. The snow were on the ground, but the sky was clear and bright, and the sun glittered on the smooth holly leaves. Lizzie asked me to gather her some of the very bright red berries, and she would begin the sentence with, "Do you remember?" when Ellie said, "Hush," and looked towards Sophie, walking a little apart and crying softly to herself. We were evidently some collection between water and the holly berries, for Lizzie threw them away at once when she saw Sophie's tears. Soon we come to a stile which led to an open, breezy common, half covered with gorse. I helped the little girls over it, and set them to run down the slope. I took Sophie's arm in mine. Though I could not speak, I think she knew how I was feeling for her. I could hardly bear to bid her goodbye at the vicarage gate. It seemed as though I ought to go in and spend the day with her. Thank you for the hydrate, Naska, and that is the end of chapter 10, so good timing. I drink to your health. Nostrovia. There's the end of the chapter, and I'm to drink habitually anyway, then I drink to your health again. This is the alchemical symbol for air, the element of dispersion and movement. It is the underlying elemental symbol for loose spirits and the non-spiritual intangible, and is used in the management of loose principles and the unpredictable phenomena of existence. It is synonymous with the gaseous state of matter. Thank you for that. Needed that. Oh, and you redeemed an occult secret. Well, congratulations. I, again, did not catch that because some of us aren't allowed to learn magic. For some reason. But congratulations on getting another one for yourself. I hope it's a good one. That makes 4 of them, and I believe you've redeemed all of them, Nasker. Is that 4 or is that 3? I think that's 4. I'm bad at keeping track of things, but yeah. Good work with that. You're very diligent in your studies, and I'm sure Lamp will reward you if he was able to speak to you directly without possessing my body. But he's not, and he's not having it tonight because we've got a thing on. Still, good work. Yeah, what was I saying? Right, the chapter we just did. What is there about the chapter? Not really much, it was quite a short one. Not a lot to say about it, but, yeah. But. Words and things. Yeah, I mean, clearly the affection is sort of developing between them, but given that this girl is to become his wife, that's not really surprising. The reminiscence about the death of young Walter, plans made that can't be broken, and his dwindling reputation, we'll see. Not a lot to say about it other than that, so pressing on. Chapter 11. Or just 11, sorry. I always, whenever I go to do a chapter, I try to read either chapter or just the number, depending on what's in the book, and this is just, technically it's Roman numerals, but it's just numbers. 11, rather than chapter 11. I'm rambling. 11. I vented my ill humour in being late for the Bullocks' dinner. There were 1 or 2 clerks, towards whom Mr. Bullock would patronise and impress him. Mrs. Bullock would decked out in extraordinary finery. Miss Bullock looked plainer than ever, but she had on some old gown or other, I think. For I heard Miss Bullock, or Mrs. Bullock, telling her it was always making a figure of herself. I began today to suspect that the mother would not be sorry if I took a fancy to the stepdaughter. I were again placed near her at dinner, and when the little ones come in to dessert, I will make them notice how fond of children she were. And indeed, when one of them nestled to her face did brighten. But the moment she caught this loud whispered remark, the gloom come back again, with something of even an anger in her look. And she was quite sullen and obstinate when urged to sing in the drawing room. Mrs. Bullock turned to me. Some young ladies won't sing unless they're asked by gentlemen. She spoke very crossly. If you ask Jemima, she will probably sing. To oblige me, it is evident she will not. I thought the singing, when we got it, would probably be a great bore. However, I did as I was bid, and went with my request to the young lady, who was sitting a little apart. She looked up at me with eyes full of tears, and said in a decided tone, which if I had not seen her eyes, I should have said were as cross as her mamma's, "No, sir, I will not." She got up and left the room. I expected to hear Mrs. Bullock's abuse of her for the obstinacy. Instead of that, she began to tell me of the money that had been spent on her education, or what each separate accomplishment had cost. She was timid, she said, but very musical. Whenever her future home might be, there would be no want of music. She went on praising it till I hated her. If they thought I were going to marry that great lubberly girl, they was mistaken. Mr. Bullock and the clerks come up. He brought out Liebig and called me to him. "I can understand a good deal of this agricultural chemistry," said he, "and have put it in practice without much success hitherto, I confess. But these unconnected letters puzzle me a little. I suppose they have some meaning, or else I should say it were mere bookmaking to put them in." "I think they give the page a very ragged appearance." "Oh no, I think they give the page a very ragged appearance," said Mrs. Bullock, who had joined us. "I inherit a little of my late father's taste for books, and must say I like to see a good type, a broad margin and elegant binding. My father despised variety. How he would have held up his hands aghast at the cheap literature of these times. He didn't require many books, but he would have 20 editions of those that he had. He paid more for binding than he did for the books themselves. But elegance was everything with him. He would not have admitted your Liebig, Mr. Bullock, neither the nature of the subject nor the common type, nor the common way in which your book is got up, would have suited him. Go and make tea, my dear, and leave Mr. Harrison and me to talk over a few of these menus." We settled to. I explained the meaning of the symbols, and the doctor drew in a chemical equivalence. At last he said, "Doctor, you're giving me too strong a dose of it at one time. Let's have a small quantity taken holding. That's professional, as Mr. Morgan would call it. Come in and call when you have a leisure, and give me a lesson on the alphabet, or in my alphabet. While you've been telling me, I can only remember that C means carbon and no oxygen. They see one must know the meaning of all these confounded letters before one can do much good with Liebig." "We dine at 3, said Mrs. Bullock. "There will always be a knife and fork for Mr. Harrison. Bullock, don't confine your invitation to the evening." "Well, you see, I have a nap always after dinner, so I could not be learning chemistry then." "Don't be so selfish, Mr. B. Think of the pleasure Gemma and I shall have in Mr. Harrison's society." I put a stop to the discussion by saying I would come in the evenings occasionally and give Mr. Bullock a lesson, but that my professional duties occupied me invariably until that time. I liked Mr. Bullock. He was simple and shrewd, and to be with a man were a relief after all the feminine society I went through every day. That's the end of chapter 11. Not too much to say on that one, but still fairly interesting, fairly solid. Again, there seems to be some pushing of this relationship that was clear that the daughter, or I should say stepdaughter, isn't interested in it. And it doesn't seem that our Mr. Harrison is especially either, so we'll press on. 12. The next morning I met Miss Horseman. "So you dined at Mr. Bullock's yesterday, Mr. Harrison? Quite a family party, I hear. They're quite charmed with you and your knowledge of chemistry. Mr. Bullock told me so in Hodgkinson's shop just now. Miss Bullock is a nice girl, eh, Mr. Harrison?" She looked sharply at me. Of course, whatever I thought, I could do nothing but assent. "A nice little fortune too. £3,000, consols from her own mother." What did I care? She might have 3 million for me. I had begun to think a great deal about money, though, but not in connection with her. I'd been doing up our books, ready to send out our Christmas bills, and I'd been wondering how far the vicar would consider 300 a year, with a prospect of increase, would justify me in thinking of Sophie. Think of her. I could not help. And the more I thought of how good and sweet and pretty she were, the more I felt that she ought to have far more than I could offer. Besides, my father were a shopkeeper, and I saw the vicar had a sort of respect for family. I determined to try and be very attentive to my profession. I were as civil as could be to everyone, more than nap off the brim of my hat by taking it off so often. I had my eyes open to every glimpse of Sophie. I'm overstocked with gloves now that I brought at that time, by way of making errands into the shops where I saw a black gown. I bought pounds upon pounds of arrowroot, till I was tired of eternal arrowroot pudding Miss Rose gave me. I asked her if she could not make bread of it, but she seemed to think that would be expensive. So I took the soap as a safe purchase. I believe soap improves by keeping. That's the end of chapter 12. Not much to that, eh? Still, the things we do for love, eh? We'll press on. Chapter 13. The more I knew of Mrs. Rose, the better I liked her. She was sweet and kind and motherly. We never had any rubs. I hurt her once or twice, I think, by cutting her short in her long stories about Mr. Rose. I found out that when she had plenty to do, she did not think of him quite so much. So I expressed a wish for cause of shirts, and in the puzzle of devising how they was to be cut, she forgot Mr. Rose for some time. I was still more pleased by her way about some legacy her elder brother had left her. I don't know the amounts, but it was something handsome, and she might have set up housekeeping for herself. But instead she told Mr. Morgan, repeated it to me, that she should continue with me, as she had quite an elder sister's interest in me. The country young lady, Miss Durrell, returned to Miss Tomkinson's after the holiday. She had an enlargement of the tonsils, which required to be frequently touched with caustic, so I often called to see her. Miss Caroline always received me, and kept me talking in a washed-out style whilst I had seen my patient. One day she told me she thought she had a weakness about the arm, and would be glad if I would bring my stethoscope next time, which I accordingly did. Hey, there's a badge for that stethoscope. And while I was on my knee listening to the pulsation of the young ladies, one of the young ladies come in. She said, "Oh dear, I beg your pardon, ma'am," and scarred out. There was not much the matter with Miss Caroline's arm, a little feeble in action or so, a mere matter of weakness and general languor. When I went down, I saw 2 or 3 of the girls peeping out the half-closed schoolroom door. They shut it immediately, and I heard them laughing. The next time I called, Miss Tompkinson was sitting in the state to receive me. Miss Tyrrell's threat does not seem to make much progress. You understand the case, Mr. Harrison, or should we have further advice? I think Mr. Morgan would probably know more about it. I assured her it was the simplest thing in the world, that it always implied a little torpor in the Constitution, and that we preferred working through the system, which, of course, was a slow process, and the medicine the young lady were taking, iodide of iron, was sure to be successful, but the progress would not be rapid. She bent her head and said, it might be so, but she confessed she had more confidence in medicines which had some effect. She seemed to expect me to tell her something, but I had nothing to say, and accordingly I bade goodbye. Somehow Miss Tompkinson always managed to make me feel very small by a succession of snubbings. Whenever I left her, I had always to comfort myself under her contradictions by saying to myself, her saying it is so does not make it so. Or I invented good retorts which I might have made to her brusque speeches if I had but thought of them at the right time. But it provoked that I had not had the presence of mind to recollect them just when they was wanted. And that's the end of chapter 13. And we'll have to break there because the answer's about to come on. So I'll see you on the other side of it. I'll have a quick drink. Now, what can we say about this chapter? And given that we're in the long ads, the book so far? Well, let's give a little progress report first. So at this point in time, we are 42 pages through out of 78. So still on pace to be just a little shy of 4 hours probably, as we're going. Maybe more like 3 3/4. Other than that, what is there to say? Don't know really. It's quite a light level novel really, aside from, well no, that's aside from the sudden and immediate death of a small charming child, I guess. Maybe light's not the right word. But I guess I don't know how to describe it though. Other than that one really serious and kind of dire moment, it's mostly just sort of a sort of light comedy of like small town provincial life and romance and all that. It's quite charming and light really, but I don't know. That one moment really did sort of shape me though. It seems very out of sync with the rest of it tone-wise. But yeah, and obviously now you've got some, like no doubt this incident with the stethoscope is going to be taken as him touching up this lady or some such, and like be an idea of them developing relationships or feelings to one another, which obviously he doesn't think is the case, so she might. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about it really. It's an interesting one though. I'm enjoying it. And some of the medical practices like iodide of iron and that, and the use of leeches on the throat, you know. Not modern, but interesting about their historical nature. And the practice and, well yeah, I guess literally the practice is interesting as well in the sort of provincial way. The way medicine used to be practiced, sort of old-fashioned as it is. Yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else we all know. Nothing super springs to mind, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, I'm enjoying it, but yeah. I don't think there's much else to say, really. Right. Yeah. Anyhow. I must swallow water again before the end of the ads. And for all of the none of you who bet on me failing to succeed in this book, I have to apologise, but I'm feeling quite good. I suspect we will get through it tonight. So that's good news for all the none of you who did bet on me succeeding. See, never bet against Skitterskreetch. Not that any of you did. I don't know why I'm persisting in this bit, but it's amusing to me. Anyhow, 3, 2, 1, and the ads is over. So, let's get back to it, shall we? On the whole, things went on smoothly. Mr. Alden's legacy come in just about the time, and I felt quite rich. £500 would furnish the house, I thought, when Mrs. Rose left and Sophie came. I was delighted too to imagine that Sophie perceived the difference in my manner to her from the way I was to anyone else, that she were embarrassed and shy in consequence, but not displeased with me for it. All was so flourishing that I went about on wings instead of feet. We was very busy without having anxious cares. My legacy were paid into Mr. Bullock's hands, who united a little banking business to his professional law. In return for his advice about investments, which I never meant to take, having a more charming if less profitable mode in my head, I went pretty frequently to teach him his agricultural chemistry. I was so happy in Sophie's blushes that I was universally benevolent, and desirous of giving pleasure to everyone. I went, at Mrs. Bullock's general invitation, to dinner there one day, unexpectedly. There was such a fuss of ill-concealed preparation consequent upon my coming, that I never went again. A little boy came in with an audibly given message from the cook to ask if this was the gentleman she was descending the best dinner service and dessert for. I looked deaf, but determined never to go again. Miss Bullock and I, meanwhile, become rather friendly. We found out that we mutually disliked each other, and were contented with the discovery. If people were worth anything, this sort of non-liking is a very good beginning of friendship. Every good quality is revealed naturally and slowly, and is a pleasant surprise. I found out that Miss Bullock was sensible, and even sweet-tempered, but not irritated by her stepmother's endeavours to show her off. But she was sulked for hours after Mrs. Bullock's offensive praise of her good points, and I never saw such a black passion as she went into when she suddenly come into the room when Mrs. Bullock was telling me of all the offers she had. My legacy made me feel up to extravagance. I scoured the country for a glorious nosegay of camellias, which I sent to Sophie on Valentine's Day. I durst not add a line, but I wished the flowers could speak and tell her I loved her. I called on Miss Tyrrell that day. Miss Caroline was more simpering and affected than ever, and full of allusions to the day. Do you affix much sincerity to the meanings of the little gallantries of this day, Mr. Harrison? Asked she, in languishing tones. I thought of my camellias, and how my art had gone with them into Sophie's safekeeping, and I told her I thought one might often take advantage of such a time to win at feelings one dared not fully express. I remembered afterwards the forced display she made, after Miss Tyrrell left the room, of a valentine. I took no notice at the time. My head was full of Sophie. It was on that very day that John Brockner, the gardener to all of us, who had a small garden to keep in order, fell down and injured his wrist severely. I don't give you the details of the case, because they will not interest you, being too technical. If you have any curiosity, you will find them in the Lancet of August of that year. You will like John, and this accident was felt like a town's misfortune. The gardens, too, just wanted doing up. Both Mr. Morgan and I went directly to him. It was a very awkward case, and his wife and children was crying sadly. He himself were in great distress at being thrown out of work. He begged us to do something that would cure him speedily, as he could not afford to be laid up with his 6 children dependent on him for bread. We did not say much before him, but we both thought the arm would have to come off, and it was his right arm. We talked it over when we come out of the cottage. Mr. Morgan had no doubt of the necessity. I went back at dinner time to see the poor fellow. He was feverish and anxious. He had caught up some expression of Mr. Morgan's in the morning, and he had guessed the measure we had in contemplation. He bade his wife leave the room and spoke to me by myself. "Even you please, sir. I'd rather be done for a race than once than have my arm taken off and be a burden to my family. I'm not afraid of dying, but I could not stand being a cripple for life, eating bread and not able to earn it." The tears was in his eyes with earnestness. I had all along been more doubtful about the necessity of amputation than Mr. Morgan. I knew the improved treatment in such cases. In his day there were much more of the rough and ready in surgical practice, so I gave the poor fellow some hope. In the afternoon I met Mr. Bullock. "So, you're to try your hand at amputation, mother, I hear. Poor John Bruckner. I used to tell him he was not careful enough about his ladders. Mr. Morgan is quite excited about it. He asked me to be present and see how well a man from the Guys could operate. He says he is sure you'll do it beautifully. Pah, no such sights for me, thank you." Ruddy Mr. Bullock went a shade or two paler at the fore. Curious how professionally a man views these things. Here's Mr. Morgan, who has been all along as proud of you as if you were his own son, absolutely rubbing his hands at the idea of this crowning glory, this feather in your cap. He told me just now he knew he had always been too nervous to be a good operator, and had therefore preferred sending for a white from Chesterton. And now anyone might have a serious accident who liked, for you would be always at home. I told Mr. Bullock I really thought he might avoid the amputation, but his mind was preoccupied with the idea of it, and did not care to listen to me. The old town were full of it. That is a charm in a little town. Everybody is so sympathetically full of the same events. Even Miss Orseman stopped me to ask after John Bruckner with interest, but she threw cold water upon my intention of saving the arm. As for the wife and family, we'll take care of them. Think what a fine opportunity you have showing off, Mr. Harrison. I would just like her, always ready with her suggestions of ill-natured or interested motives. Mr. Morgan heard my proposal of a mode of treatment by which I thought it possible the arm might be saved. I differ from you, Mr. Harrison, said he. I regret it, but I differ in toto from you. Your kind heart deceives you in this instance. There is no doubt that amputation must take place, not later than tomorrow morning, I should say. I have made myself at liberty to attend upon you, sir. I shall be happy to officiate as your assistant. Time was when I should have been proud to be a principal, but a little trembling in my arm incapacitates me. I urged my reason upon him again, but he were obstinate. He had, in fact, boasted so much of my acquirements as an operator that he were unwilling I should lose the opportunity of displaying my skill. He could not see that there would be greater skill evinced in saving the arm, nor did I think of this at the time. I grew angry at his old-fashioned narrow-mindedness, as I thought it, and I became dogged in my resolution to adhere to my own course. We parted very coolly, and I went straight off to John Bruckner to tell him I believed that I could save the arm, if he would refuse to have it amputated. When I calmed myself a little before going in and speaking to him, I could not help acknowledging that we should run some risk of lockjaw. But on the whole, and after giving most earnest, conscientious thought to the case, I was sure that my mode of treatment would be best. You are a sensible man. I told him the difference of opinion that existed between Mr. Morgan and myself. I said there might be some little risk of attending to the non-amputation, but that I should guard against it, and I trusted that I should be able to preserve his arm. Under God's blessing, he said reverently. I bowed my head. I don't like to talk too frequently of the dependence which I always felt on that holy blessing as the result of my efforts. We were glad to see that speech of John's, because it showed a calm and faithful arm, and I had almost certain hopes of him from that time. We agreed that he should tell Mr. Morgan the reason of his objections to the amputation, and his reliance on my opinion. I determined to recur to every book I had relating to such cases, and convince Mr. Morgan, if I could, of my wisdom. Unluckily, I found out afterwards that he had met Miss Osman in the time that intervened before I saw him again at his own house that evening, and she was more than hinted that I shrank from performing the operation, for very good reasons, no doubt. She had heard that the medical students in London were a bad set, and were not remarkable for regular attendance in the hospitals. She might be mistaken, but she thought it would perhaps quite as well poor John Bruckner had not his arm cut off, but was there no such thing as a mortification coming on after a clumsy operation, yet perhaps only a choice of deaths? Mr. Morgan had been stung at all this. Perhaps I did not speak out quite respectfully enough. I were a good deal excited. We only got more and more angry with each other, though he, to do him justice, was as civil as he could be all the time, thinking that thereby he concealed his vexation and disappointment. He did not try to conceal his anxiety about poor John. I went home weary and dispirited. I made up and took the necessary applications to John, and, promising to return with the dawn of the day, I would fain have stayed, but I did not wish him to be alarmed about himself. I went home, and resolved to sit up and study the treatment of similar cases. Mrs. Rose knocked at the door. "Come in," I said sharply. She said she had seen I had something on my mind all day, and she could not go to bed without asking if there were nothing she could do. She was good and calm, and I could not help telling her a little of the truth. She listened pleasantly, and I shook her warmly by the hand, thinking that, though she might not be very wise, a good heart made her worth a dozen keen, sharp-eyed people like Miss Osman. When I went at daybreak, I saw John's wife for a few minutes outside the door. She seemed to wish her husband had been in Mr. Morgan's hands rather than mine, but she gave me as good an account as I dared to hope for in the manner in which her husband had passed the night. This was confirmed by my own examination. When Mr. Morgan and I visited him together later on in the day, John said what we had agreed upon the day before, and I told Mr. Morgan openly that it would by my advice the amputation would decline. He did not speak to me till we had left the house, and he said, "Now, sir, from this time I consider this case entirely in your hands. Only remember the poor fellow has a wife and 6 children. In case you come round to my opinion, remember that Mr. White could come over, as he has done before, for the operation. So, Mr. Morgan believed I declined operating because I felt myself incapable. Very well. I was much mortified. An hour after we parted, I received a note to this effect. Dear Sir, I will take the long round today. I leave you at liberty to attend to Brockner's case, which I feel to be a very responsible one, and J. Morgan. This was kindly done. I went back as soon as I could to John's cottage. While I was in the inner room with him, I heard Miss Tompkinson's voices outside. They had called to inquire. Miss Tompkinson come in, and evidently were foking and snuffing about. Mrs. Brockner told her I were within, and within I resolved to be till they had gone. What's this clothes smell? Asked she. I'm afraid you are not cleanly. Cheese in this cupboard. No wonder there is an unpleasant smell. Don't you know how particular you should be about being clean when there's an illness about? Mrs. Brockner were exquisitely clean in general, and were piqued at these remarks. If you please, ma'am, I could not leave John yesterday to do any housework, and Jenny put the dinner things away. She is but 8 years old. This did not satisfy Miss Tompkinson, who were evidently pursuing the course of her observations. Fresh butter, I declare. Well now, Miss Brockner, do you know I don't allow myself fresh butter at this time of year? How can you save, indeed, with such extravagance? Please, ma'am, asked Miss Brockner, you'd think it strange if I were to take such liberties in your house as you're taking here. I expected to hear a sharp answer. No, Miss Tompkinson, after true plain speaking. The only person in whom she would tolerate roundabout ways of talking were her sister. Well, that's true, she said. Still, you must not be above taking advice. Fresh butter is extravagant at this time of the year. However, you're a good kind of woman, and I have great respect for John. Send Jenny for some broth as soon as he can take it. Come, Caroline, we have to go on to Williams. Miss Caroline said that she would tire and rest where she were till Miss Thompson would come back. I were a prisoner for some time, I found. Once you were alone with Mrs. Brockner, she said, You must not be hurt by my sister's abrupt manner. She means well. She has not much imagination or sympathy, and cannot understand the distraction of mind produced by the illness of a worshipped husband. I could hear the loud sigh of commiseration which followed this speech. Mrs. Brockner said, Please, ma'am, I don't worship my husband. I would not be so wicked. Goodness, you don't think it wicked, do you? For my part, if I should worship, I should adore him. I thought she need not imagine such improbable cases. But sturdy Mrs. Brockner said again, I hope I know my duty better. I've not learned my commandments for nothing. I know whom I ought to worship. Just then the children come in, dirty and unwashed, I have no doubt. And now Miss Caroline's real nature peeped out. She spoke sharply to them and asked them if they had no manners, little pigs as they were, to come brushing against her silk gown in that way. She sweetened herself again and was as sugary as love when Miss Thompson returned for her, accompanied by one whose voice, like winds in summer sighing, I knew to be my dear Sophie's. She did not say much, but what she did say, and the manner in which she spoke, were tender and compassionate in the highest degree. And she came to take the 4 little ones back with her to the vicarage, in order they might be out of their mother's way. The older 2 might help her home. She offered to wash their hands and faces, and when I emerged from my inner chamber, after the Miss Tompkinsons had left, I found her with a chubby child on her knees, bubbling and spluttering against her white wet hand, with a face bright, rosy and merry under the operation. Just as I come in, she said to him, There, Jeremy, now I can kiss you with this nice clean face. She coloured when she saw me. I liked her speaking, and I liked her silence. She was silent now, and I loved her all the better. I loved her all the better. I gave my direction to Miss Brockner, and hastened to overtake Sophie and the children. But they had gone round by the lanes, I suppose, for I saw nothing of them. I was very anxious about the case. At night I went again. Miss Osmond had been there, I believe. I believe she was really kind among the poor, but she could not help leaving a sting behind her everywhere. She had been frightening Mrs. Brockner about her husband, and been, I have no doubt, expressing her doubts of my skill, for Miss Brockner began, Oh, please, sir, if you'll only let Mr. Morgan take off his arm, you'll never think worse of you for not being able to do it. I told her it was from no doubt of my own competency to perform the operation that I wished to save the arm, but he himself were anxious to have it spared. Ay, bless him, he frets about not earning enough to keep us if he's crippling, But sir, I don't care about that. I would work my fingers to the bone, and so would the children. I'm sure he'd be proud to do it for him, and keep him. God bless him. It would be far better to have him with only one arm than to have him beat in the churchyard. Miss Usman says, "Confound Miss Usman," I said. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Harrison," said her well-known voice beyond me. She had come out, dark as it was, to bring some old lemon the Miss brought her, for as I said before, she was very kind to all the poor people of Duncombe. "I beg your pardon, for I really was sorry for my speech, or rather that she had heard it. There's no occasion for any apology," she replied, drawing herself up, and pinching her lips into a very venomous shape. John were doing pretty well, but of course the danger of lockjaw was not over. Before I had left, his wife entreated me to take off the arm. She wrung her hands in her passionate entreaty. "Spare him to me, Mr. Harrison," she implored. Miss Orson stood by. It was mortifying enough, but I thought of the power which were in my hands, as I firmly believed, of saving the limb, and I were inflexible. You cannot think how pleasantly Mrs. Rose's sympathy came in on my return. To be sure, she did not understand one word of the case, which I detailed to her, but she listened with interest, and as long as she held her tongue, I thought she would really take it in. But her first remark was as malapropos as could be. "You're anxious to save the tibia. I see completely how difficult that would be. My late husband had a case exactly similar, and I remember his anxiety. You must not distress yourself too much, my dear Mr. Harrison. I have no doubt it will end well." I knew she had no grounds for this assurance, and yet it comforted me. Whatever has happened, John did fully as well as I could hope. Of course, he was long in rallying his strength, and indeed, to see how reverently so necessary for his complete restoration, I accepted with gratitude Mrs. Rose's proposal of sending him to our port for a fortnight or 3 weeks. Her kind generosity in this matter made me more desirous than ever of paying her every mark of respect and attention. And that's the end of chapter 14. I'll have a quick drink. And at this point, I think I shall indulge in a lozenge for my throat, which is starting to feel a little bit strained. I should really be doing them on the hours in one of these marathon things, but I forgot about it until now. Because for all that I'm a well-read rat, I'm not necessarily a smart rat. Well then, what to make of this chapter? That's quite an important one, or at least an involved one. He's finally making his own bones, is our Frank Harrison. Making a stand on a medical matter against his supposed mentor and senior partner in the practice. Making his own call on a medical situation. Making use of the latest in modern medicine of the year 1850, which, I guess is probably better than the medicine of 1830, and seemingly successfully saving this arm. Though I suppose we still have time for things to all go wrong, so we'll see. But yeah. What else is there to say about this? I don't think too much. I mean, obviously Miss Horseman is sort of cemented here as something of an enemy. And Miss Rose is becoming more and more sturdy and constant ally of his. But other than that, I think Binks is pretty the same. Though depending on how it goes, I suspect that it might affect his relationship with Mr. Morgan as well. Well, I say it will affect his relationship with the old town, whether it goes well or not. If it goes well, it'll be an hero, and if it goes badly, well, I suppose we'll find out, won't we? At any rate, we'll see how it goes. So, pressing on. 15. About this time, there was a sale at Ashmeadow, a pretty house in the neighbourhood of Duncombe. It was likewise an easy walk, and the spring day tempted many people thither who had no intention of buying anything, who liked the idea of rambling through the woods, gay with early primroses and wild daffodils, to see in the gardens and house which till now had been shut up from the ingress of the townspeople. Mrs. Rose had planned to go, but an unlucky cold prevented her. She begged me to bring her a very particular account, saying she delighted in details, and always questioned the late Mr. Rose as to the side dishes of the diners, and the side dishes of the dinners to which he went. The late Mr. Rose's conduct were always held up as a good model to me. By the way, I walked to Ashmeadow, pausing or loitering with different parties of townspeople, all bound in the same direction. At last I found the vicar and Sophie, and with them I stayed. I sat by Sophie and talked and listened. I say it is a very pleasant gathering after all. The auctioneer in a country place is privileged to joke from his rostrum, and having a personal knowledge of most of the people can sometimes make a very keen hit at their circumstances and turn the laugh against them. For instance, on the present occasion, there were a farmer present with his wife, who were notoriously the grey mare. I think that's an expression that's going on there. With his wife, who were notoriously the grey mare. The auctioneer was selling some orthcloths and called out to recommend the article to her, telling her with a knowing look at the company that would make her a dashing pair of trousers if she would in want of such an article. She drew herself up with dignity and said, "Come, John, we've had enough of these." Whereupon there were a burst of laughter, and in the midst of it, John neatly followed his wife out of the place. The furniture in the sitting room was, I believe, very beautiful, but I did not notice it much. Suddenly I heard the auctioneer speaking to me. "Mr. Harrison, won't you give me a bid for the table?" A very pretty little table of walnut wood, I thought. I thought it would go in my study well, so I gave him a bid. I saw Miss Horseman bidding against me, so I went off with full force, and at last it was knocked down on me. The auctioneer smiled and congratulated me. "A most useful present for Mr. Harrison, when that lady comes." Everybody laughed. They like a joke about marriage. It is so easy a comprehension. But the table, which I thought was for writing, turned out to be a work table. Scissors and thimbles complete. No wonder I looked foolish. Sophie were not looking at me, that was one comfort. She was busy arranging a nosegay of wood anemone and wild sorrel. Miss Horseman came up with her curious eyes. "I had no idea things were far enough advanced for you to be purchasing a work table, Mr. Harrison." I laughed up my awkwardness. "Did you not, Miss Horseman? You are very much behind that. You've not heard of my piano, then?" "No, indeed," she said, half uncertain whether I was serious or not. "Then it seems there is nothing wanting but the lady." "Perhaps she may never want me either," said I, for I wished to perplex her keen curiosity. And that's the end of chapter 15. So, thank you all for the eye track. And as before, I shall drink once to your health, Nostrovia. And as we're at the end of the chapter, I'm going to do a drink anyway. I'll drink again to your health. Slant you. Lord Almighty. I should learn some different toasts. That's something I should do. I should pick up some different toasts so I can do them at random. I'll keep doing this, Nostrovia. Yeah. And again, we hear a little bit of, we have a little bit of relationship development with Sophie. And now the town is getting in on it because he has boldly purchased a work table, which is in the 1850s, surely only for women's work. Thinking itself a writing table, thinking a writing table for himself, but you know. He does have a woman in mind, so who knows, maybe it will come in useful after all. And who knows, maybe just Mrs. Rose will be pleased with it, you never know. But still, he's deliberately spreading rumours about himself to make himself avoid looking foolish, and things are no doubt about to get all confused and very wrong. But it should be a good laugh. But I've not much else to say for it. So, I should press on. 16. When I got home from my round, I found Mrs. Rose in some sorrow. "Miss Horseman called after you all left," she said. "Have you heard how John Bruckner is at Highport?" "Very well," I replied. "I called on his wife just now, and she had just got a letter from him. She had been anxious about him, for he had not heard for a week, whether all was right now, and she has a pretty well of work at Mrs. Mutton's, as her servant is ill." "Oh, that'll do, never fear." "But Mrs. Mutton's? Oh, that accounts for it then. She is so deaf and makes such blunders." "Accounts for what?" asked I. "Oh, perhaps I'd better not tell you," hesitated Mrs. Rose. "Ooh. Very good. Well then, I shall read the rest of this chapter up as straight as I can, and in proper farm form. Thank you for the posture check. "And Miss Muntins, oh, that accounts for it. She is so deaf and makes such blunders." "Accounts for what?" asked I. "Oh, perhaps I'd better not tell you," hesitated Miss Rose. "Yes, tell me at once. I beg your pardon, but I hate mysteries." "You are so like my dear poor Mr. Rose. He used to speak to me just in that sharp, Crossway. It's only that Miss Horseman called. She'd making a collection for John Bruckner's widow, and but the man's alive, said I. So it seems. Mrs. Munton had told her that he was dead, and she has got Mr. Morgan's name down at the head of the list, and Mr. Bullock's. Mr. Morgan and I have got into a short, cool way of speaking to each other ever since we differed so much about the treatment of Bruckner's arm. I'd heard once or twice of his shakes of the head over John's case. He would not have spoken against my method for the world, and fancied that he concealed his fears. Miss Horseman is very ill-natured, I think. Miss Horseman is very ill-natured, I think, sighed forth Mrs. Rose. I saw that something had been said of which I had not heard, for the mere fact of collecting money for the widow were good-natured, whoever did it. So I asked quietly what she had said. Oh, I don't know if I should tell you. I only know she made me cry, for I'm not well, and can't bear to hear anyone that I live with abused. Come, this was pretty plain. What did Mrs. Horseman say of me? What did Miss Horseman say of me? Asked I, half laughing, for I knew there was no love lost between us. Oh, she only said she wondered if you could go to sales and spend your money there when your ignorance had made John Bruckner a widow and her children fatherless. Pooh-pooh. John's alive and likely to live as long as you are, thanks to you, Mrs. Rose. Thank you. When my work table come home, Mrs. Rose was so struck with his beauty and completeness, and I was so much obliged to her for identification of my interest with hers, and the kindness of her whole conduct about John, I begged her to accept of it. She seemed very much pleased, and after a few apologies she consented to take it, and placed it in the most conspicuous part of the front parlour, where she usually sat. There were a good deal of mourning calling in Duncombe after the sale, and during this time the fact of John's being alive was established to the conviction of all except Miss Horseman, who I believe still doubted. I myself told Mr. Morgan, who immediately went to reclaim his money, saying to me that he would thank for the information. He was truly glad to hear it, and he shook me warmly by the hand for the first time for a month. That's the end of chapter 16. Well. I think that's quite likely to improve the stand of the young man, despite Mrs. Horseman's intentions. Proclaiming a person dead and then having them come back to life does so to be the work of quite a miracle surgeon, doesn't it? I don't think there's too much else to say, well, other than commenting that it's nice that Mrs. Rose got the tape. But yeah. Pressing right along. 17. A few days after the sale, I were in the consulting room. The servant must have left the folding doors a little ajar, I think. Mrs. Munton come up to call on Mrs. Rose, and the former being deaf, I heard all the speeches of the latter lady, as she were obliged to speak very loud in order to be heard. She began, "This is a great pleasure, Mrs. Munton, so seldom as you are well enough to go out." Mumble, 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 through the door. "Oh, very well, thank you. Take this seat, and then you can admire my new work table, ma'am. A present from Mr. Harrison." Mumble, mumble. "Who could have told you, ma'am? Miss Horseman? Oh, yes, I showed it to Miss Horseman." Mumble, mumble. "I don't quite understand you, ma'am." Mumble, mumble. "I'm not blushing, I believe. I really am quite in the dark as to what you mean." Mumble, mumble. "Oh, yes, Mr. Harrison and I are most comfortable together. He reminds me so of my dear Mr. Rose, just as fidgety and anxious about in his profession." Mumble, mumble. "I am sure you were joking now, ma'am." Then I heard pretty loud, "Oh, no." Mumble, 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 for a long time. "Did he really? Well, I'm sure I don't know. I should be sorry to think he was doomed to be unfortunate in so serious an affair. You know my undying regard for the late Mr. Rose." Another long mumble. "You're very kind, I'm sure. Mr. Rose always thought the more of my happiness than his own." A little cry. "But the turtle dove has always been my ideal, ma'am." Mumble, mumble. "No one could have been happier than I. As you say, it is a compliment to matrimony." Mumble. "Oh, but you must not repeat such a thing to Mr. Harrison." Must not repeat such a thing. Mr. Harrison would not like it. He can't bear to have his affairs spoken about." Then there were a change of subject. An inquiry after some poor person, I imagine. I heard Miss Rose say, "She has got a mucous membrane, I'm afraid, ma'am." A commiserating mumble. "Not always fatal. I believe Mr. Rose knew some cases that lived for years after it was discovered that they had a mucous membrane." A pause, and Miss Rose spoke in a different tone. "Are you sure, ma'am, there's no mistake about what he said?" Mumble. Pray don't be so observant, Mrs. Mutton. You find out too much. One can have no little secrets. The call broke up, and I heard Mrs. Mutton say in the passage, I wish you joy, ma'am, with all my heart. There's no use denying it, for I've seen all along what would happen. When I went to dinner, I said to Mrs. Rose, You've had Mrs. Mutton here, I think. Did she bring any news? To my surprise, she bridled and simpered and replied, Oh, you must not ask, Mr. Harrison, such foolish reports. I did not ask, as she seemed to wish me not, and I knew there were silly reports always about. Then I think she was vexed that I did not ask. Altogether, she went on so strangely that I could not help looking at her, and then she took up an hand screen and held it between me and her. I really felt rather anxious. Are you not feeling well? I asked innocently. Oh, thank you, I believe I'm quite well, only the room is rather warm, is it not? Let me put the blinds down for you. The sun begins to have a good deal of power. I drew down the blinds. You were so attentive, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Rose himself never did more for my little wishes than you do. I wish I could do more. I wish I could show you how much I feel. I'd kindness to John Bruckmeyer, I was going on to say. I was just then called out to a patient. Before I went, I turned back and said, Take care of yourself, my dear Mrs. Rose. You'd better rest a little. For your sake I will, said she tenderly. I did not care for her sake she did it. Only I really thought she was not quite well and required rest. I thought she was more affected than usual at tea time, and could have been angry with her nonsensical ways once or twice, but I knew the real goodness of her heart. She said she wished she had the power to sweeten my life as she could my tea. I told her what a comfort she had been during all during my late time of anxiety. Then I stole out to try if I could hear the evening singing at the vicarage by standing close to the garden wall. And just when you think you can't get any more messed up, eh? So Mr. Harrison has a third suitor, or suitress. Is the term suitor when it's a woman pursuing a man, or is that a man pursuing a woman exclusively? Anyway. A third romantic interest at any count, apart from his own interested party. And of course rumours will spread and gossip all about. And being that she is a woman, I think significantly older than him, and she was married for 20 years and he's just now completed his medical degree. So I'm assuming she's probably about 20 years his senior, thereabouts. No doubt this will be a scandal and gossip in the town. Still, does anyone want to see how it's going to play out? So let me have a quick swallow of water and we'll press on. The next morning, I met Mr. Bullock by appointment to talk a little about the legacy which were paid into his hands. As I was leaving his office, feeling full of my riches. Fair enough. Well, I hope you, I hope you have a good time with your family, Abbe. If you're not here by the time we get back, then I'll give you my blessing and goodwill, even though you're not here to receive it at the end. You deserve it. And if you are, I hope to see you then. But yeah, always appreciate your presence. You're a constant comfort in my life. And I'd go on to profess more about that, but I don't want to pull a Mr. Harris and Mrs. Rose here, so take care of yourself. Fair enough. Well, I hope you have a good meal then. Yeah. Always appreciate your presence. Have a good time. And what are we doing? Yeah. As I was leaving his office, full of my riches. You're very welcome, Abby. I met Miss Horseman. She smiled rather grimly and said, Oh, Mr. Harrison, I must congratulate you. I believe I don't know whether I ought to have known, but as I do, I must wish you joy. A very nice little sum, too. They always said you would have money. So she had found out about my legacy, had she? Well, it was no secret. One likes the reputation of being a person of property. Accordingly, I smiled and said I was much obliged to her, and if I could alter the figure to my liking, she might congratulate me still more. She said, Oh, Mr. Harrison, you can't have everything. It would be better the other way, certainly. Money is the great thing, as you found out. The relation died most opportunely, I must say. He was no relative, said I, only an intimate friend. Dear me, I thought it had been a brother. Well, at any rate, the legacy is safe. I wished her good morning and passed on. Before long I was sent for to Miss Tompkinson's. Miss Tompkinson sat in a severe state to receive me. I went in with an air of ease, because I always felt so uncomfortable. "Is this true that I hear?" asked she in an inquisitorial manner. I thought she alluded to my £500, so I smiled and said I believed it was. "Can money be so great an object with you, Mr. Harrison?" she asked again. I said I had never cared much for money, except as an assistance to any plan of settling in life. And then, as I didn't like a severe way of treating the subject, I said that I hoped everyone was well. Of course, I expected someone was ill, or I should not have been sent for. Miss Tompkinson looked very grave and sad. Then she answered, "Caroline is very poorly, the old palpitations of the heart. But of course that is nothing to you." I said, "We're very sorry. She had weaknesses there, I know. Could I see her? I might be able to order something for her." I thought I heard Miss Tompkinson say something. I thought I heard Miss Tompkinson say something in a low voice about my being an artless deceiver. And she spoke up. "I was always distrustful of you, Mr. Harrison. I never liked your looks. I begged Caroline again and again not to confide in you. I foresaw how it would end. Now I fear her precious life will be the sacrifice. I begged her not to distress herself. In all probability there were very little the matter with her sister. Might I see her?" "No," she said sharply, standing up as if to dismiss me. "There's been too much of this seeing and calling. By my consent you shall never see her again." I bowed. Annoyed, of course. Such a dismissal might injure my practice just when I were most anxious to increase it. "Have you no apology, no excuse to offer?" I said I had done my best. I did not feel there were any reason to offer an apology. I wished her good morning. Suddenly she came forward. "Oh, Mr. Harrison," said she, "if you have really loved Caroline, do not let a little paltry money make you desert her for another." I was struck dumb. Love Miss Caroline? I loved Miss Tompkinson a great deal better, yet I disliked her. She went on, "I have saved nearly £3,000. If you think you are too poor to marry without money, I will give it all to Caroline. I am strong and go on working, but she is weak, and this disappointment will kill her." She sat down suddenly and covered her face with her hands, and she looked up. "You are unwilling, I see. Don't suppose I would have urged you if it had not been for myself. She has so much sorrow." Now she fairly cried aloud. I tried to explain, but she would not listen, but kept saying, "Leave the house, sir, leave the house." But I would be heard. I've never had any feeling more than respect for Miss Caroline, and I've never shown any different feeling. I never for an instant thought of making her my wife, and she has no cause to my behaviour to imagine I entertained any such intention. "This is adding insult to injury," said she. "Leave the house, sir, this instant." That's the end of chapter 18. Things do seem to be running a little bit wild, don't they? I think we'll press directly on. Chapter 19. I went, and sadly enough. In a small town such an occurrence is sure to be talked about, and make a great deal of mischief. When I went home to dinner I was so full of it, and foresaw so clearly that I should need some advocate soon to set the case right in its right light, I determined on making a confidant of good Mrs. Rose. I could not eat. She watched me tenderly and sighed when she saw my want of appetite. "I am sure you have something in your mind, Mr. Harrison. Would it not be a relief to impart it to some sympathising friend?" It was just what I wanted to do. "My dear calm Miss Rose," said I must tell you if you will listen." She took up the fire screen and held it as yesterday between me and her. "A most unfortunate misunderstanding has taken place. Miss Tompkins thinks that I have been paying attention to Miss Caroline, when in fact, may I tell you, Miss Rose, my affections are placed elsewhere. Perhaps you have found out already, for indeed I thought I had been too much in love to conceal my attachment to Sophie from anyone who knew my movements as well as Mrs. Rose. She hung down her head and said she believed she had found out my secret. I only think how miserably I am situated. If I have any hope, dear Miss Rose, do you think I have any hope?" She put the hand screen still more before her face, and after some hesitation she said she thought, if I persevered, in time I might have hope. And then she suddenly got up and left the room. That's the end of chapter 19. I'm sort of despairing here, because not only is this distinctly a comedy of errors and just miscommunication. Well written, sort of understandable miscommunication. But I feel bad for Mrs. Rose now, because she's, by all accounts, a lovely lady, and was not seeking anything, but all very content. Has come to like this young man, and now thinks that he is doting on her. I just feel bad for her, really. Like, Caroline obviously had her affections as well, but he was never reciprocating to her. But Miss Rose has reason to believe, that he's come onto her, and now she is finding after a mourning period that she's maybe open to something, and she's the one I feel bad for. It's gonna go badly for her more than anyone else. Lord, still though, nothing to do but press on here. Let's have a swallow of water to fortify myself. Again, wish for brandy. Alright. Pressing right along then. 20. That afternoon I met Mr. Bullock in the street. My mind was so full of the affair with Miss Tompkinson, I should have passed him without notice if he had not stopped me short and said he must speak to me, about my wonderful £500, I supposed. But I did not care for that now. What is this I hear, he said severely, about your engagement with Mrs. Rose? Well, Mrs. Rose, said I, almost laughing, although my heart were heavy enough. Yes, with Mrs. Rose, he said sternly. I'm not engaged to Miss Rose, I replied. There's some mistake. I'm glad to hear it, sir, he answered. Very glad. Requires some explanation, however. Mrs. Rose has been congratulated and has acknowledged the truth of the report. It is confirmed by many facts. The work table you bought, confessing your intention of giving it to your future wife, is given to her. How do you account for these things, sir? I said I did not pretend to account for them. At present, a good deal were inexplicable, and when I could give an explanation, I did not think that I should feel myself called upon to give it to him. Very well, sir, very well, replied he, growing very red. I shall take care and let Mr. Morgan know the opinion I entertain of you. What do you think a man deserves to be called who enters a family under the plea of friendship, and takes advantage of his intimacy to win the affections of the daughter, and then engages himself to another woman? I thought you referred to Miss Caroline. I simply said I could only say that I were not engaged, and that Miss Tompkinson had been quite mistaken in supposing I had been paying any attention to her sister, beyond those dictated by Miss Ability. Miss Tompkinson, Miss Caroline, I don't understand to what you refer. Is there another victim to your perfidy? But I allude to the attention you have paid to my daughter, Miss Bullock. Another? I could but disclaim, as I had done in the case of Miss Caroline, but I begun to be in despair. Would Miss Horseman come forward as a victim to my tender affections? It was all Mr. Morgan's doing, who had lectured me into his tenderly deferential manner. But on the score of Miss Bullock's, I were brave in my innocence. I had positively disliked her, and so I told her father, in more civil and measured terms, and that I was sure the feeling were reciprocal. He looked as if he would like to horsewhip me. I longed to call him out. I hope my daughter has had enough sense to despise you. I hope she has, that's all. I trust my wife may be mistaken as to her feeling. So he had heard all through the meeting with his wife. I explained something, and rather calmly. I begged he would ask Miss Bullock if she had ever thought I had any ulterior objects in my intercourse with her, beyond mere friendliness, and not so much of that I might have added. I would refer it to her. Girls, said Mr. Bullock, a little more quietly, do not like to acknowledge that they have been deceived and disappointed. I consider my wife's testimony as likely to nearer the truth than my daughter's for that reason. She tells me she never doubted but that, if not absolutely engaged, you understood each other perfectly. She assured Jemima is deeply wounded by your engagement to Mrs. Rose. Once for all, I am not engaged to anybody. Till you have seen your daughter and learnt the truth from her, I will wish you farewell. I bowed in a stiff, haughty manner and walked off homeward. When I got to my own door, I remembered Mrs. Rose, and all that Mr. Bullock had said about her, acknowledging the truth of the report of my engagement in her. Where could I go to be safe? Mrs. Rose, Miss Bullock, Miss Caroline, they lived, as it were, at the 3 points of an equilateral triangle. Here I were in the centre. I would go to Mr. Morgan's and drink tea with him. There, at any rate, I was secure from anyone wanting to marry me. I might be as professionally bland as I like without being misunderstood. There too, a contretemps awaited me. And that's the end of chapter 20. Well, these things coming out Although, he does seem to have taken the worst of it every turn, eh? Right then, pressing right along. 21. Mr. Morgan were looking grave. After a minute or two of umming and ahhing, he said, "I have been sent for to Miss Caroline Tompkinson, Mr. Harrison. I am sorry to hear of this. I am grieved to find that there seems to have been some trifling with the affections of a very worthy lady. Miss Tompkinson, who is in sad distress, tells me that they had every reason to believe you were attached to her sister. When I ask if you do not intend to marry her, I said nothing more further from my thoughts." "My dear sir," said Mr. Morgan, rather agitated, "do not express yourself so strongly and vehemently. It is derogatory to the sex the sex to speak so. It is more respectful to say, in the cases, that you do not venture to entertain a hope. Such a manner is generally understood, and does not sound like such a possessive objection." "I cannot help it, sir. I must talk in my own natural manner. I would not speak disrespectfully of any woman, but nothing should induce me to marry Miss Caroline Tompkinson, not if she were Venus herself and Queen of England at the bargain. I cannot understand what has given rise to the ideas." "Indeed, sir, I think that is very plain. You have a trifling case to attend to in the house, and you invariably make it a pretext for seeing and conversing with the lady." "That was her doing, not mine," said I vehemently. "Allow me to go on. You were discovered on your knees before her, a positive injury to the establishment. As Miss Tompkinson observes, a most passionate valentine is sent, and when questioned you acknowledge the sincerity of meaning which you affix to such things." He stopped, for in his earnestness he had been talking more quickly than usual, and were out of breath. I burst into my explanations. "The valentine I know nothing about. It is in your handwriting," said he coldly. "I should be most deeply grieved to... In fact, I will not think it possible of your father's son. But I must say it is in your handwriting." I tried again, and at last succeeded in convincing him that I had been only unfortunate, or intentionally guilty, of winning Miss Caroline's affections. I said that I had been endeavouring, it were true, to practise the manner he had recommended, of universal sympathy, and recalled to his mind some of the advice he had given me. He were a good deal hurried. "But my dear sir, I had no idea you carried out to such consequence." "Philandering, Miss Tompkinson called it. That is a hard word, sir. My manner has been always tender and sympathetic, but I am not aware that I ever excited any hopes. There never was any report about me. I believe no lady was ever attached to me. I must strive after this happy medium, sir." I was still distressed. Mr. Morgan had only heard of one, but there were 3 ladies, including Miss Bullock, hoping to marry me. He saw my annoyance. "Don't be too much distressed about it, my dear sir. I was sure you were too honourable a man from the first. With a conscience like yours, I would defy the world." Become anxious to console me, and I were hesitating whether I would tell him all my 3 dilemmas, when a note were brought in to him. It was from Mrs. Mutton. He threw it to me with a face of despair. "My dear Mr. Morgan, I most sincerely congratulate you on the happy matrimonial engagement I hear you have formed with Miss Tompkinson. All previous circumstances I have just been remarking to Miss Horseman combine to promise you felicity, and I wish that every blessing may attend your married life. Most sincerely yours, Jane Munton." I could not help laughing. He had been so lately congratulating himself that no reports of the kind had ever circulated about himself. He had said, "Sir, this is no laughing matter. I assure you it is not." I could not resist asking if I would have concluded that there were no truth in the report. "Truth, sir? It's a lie from beginning to end. I don't like to speak too decidedly about any lady. I have a great respect for Miss Tompkinson, but I do assure you, sir, I'd as soon marry one of Her Majesty's lifeguards. I would rather, it would be more suitable. Miss Tompkin is a very worthy lady, but she's a perfect grenadier." He grew very nervous, irreverently insecure. He thought it not impossible that Miss Tompkinson might come and marry him, via d'ami. I am sure he had some dim idea of abduction in his mind. Still, he were better off than I was, for he were in his own house, and reports had only engaged him to one lady, while I stood like Paris among 3 contending beauties. Truly, an apple of discord had been thrown into our little town. I suspected at the time what I know now, that it was Miss Horseman's doing. Not intentionally, I will do her the justice to say, that she had tatted out the story of my behaviour to Miss Caroline, up to Mrs. Munton's trumpet, and that lady, possessed with the idea that I were engaged to Mrs. Rose, had imagined the masculine pronoun to relate to Mr. Morgan, whom she had seen only that afternoon, tete-a-tete with Miss Tompkinson. Condoling with her in some tender deferential manner, I'll be bound. That's the end of chapter 21. Well, it's going apart further than I thought it would, and faster too. I'll give it props, it's not an unfunny piece. I'll have my swallow of water and we'll press on. We're not too far from the end of things now. Only 15 pages left. 22. I was very cowardly. I positively dared not go home, but at length I were obliged to. I'd done all I could to console Mr. Morgan, but he refused to be comforted. I went at last. I rung the bell. I don't know who opened the door, but I think it was Mrs. Rose. I kept an handkerchief to my face, and muttering something about having a dreadful toothache, I flew up to my room and bolted the door. I had no candle, but what did that signify? I was safe. I could not sleep, and when I did fall into a sort of doze, it was 10 times worse than waking up. I could not remember whether I were engaged or not. If I were engaged, it were the lady. I always considered myself as rather plain than otherwise, but surely I had made a mistake. Fascinating I certainly must be, but perhaps I were handsome. As soon as day dawned, I got up to ascertain the fact at the looking-glass. Even with the best disposition to be convinced, I could not see any striking beauty in my round face, with an unshaven beard, and a nightcap like a fool's cap at the top. No, I must be content to be plain but agreeable. All this I tell you in confidence. I will not have my little bit of vanity known for the world. I fell asleep towards morning. I was awakened by a tap at my door. It was Peggy. She put in an hand with a note. I took it. It's not from Miss Horseman, I said, half in joke, half in very earnest fright. No, sir. Mr. Morgan's man brought it. I opened it. It ran thus. My dear sir, it is now nearly 20 years since I have had a little relaxation. I find that my health requires it. I have also the utmost confidence in you, and I am sure this feeling is shared by our patients. I have therefore no scruple in putting in execution a hastily formed plan and going to Chesterton to catch the early train on my way to Paris. If your accounts are good, I shall remain away probably a fortnight. Director Maurice is yours most truly, J. Morgan. Cowardice and perfidy. And the correct decision on his part. Get out of there. I misjudged Mr. Morgan. He may be stiff and a bit of a posh dick, but God, he's a rare heart. He really is, and I respect the hell out of it. P.S. Perhaps it may be as well not to name where I am gone, especially to Miss Tompkinson. Oh, never mind, best character. I misjudged him so severely. No, he's the best character in this book. All respect to him, all respect to Morgan. He had deserted me. He, with only one report, had left me to stand my ground with three. Mrs. Rose's kind regards, sir, and it's nearly 9 o'clock. Breakfast has been ready this hour, sir. Tell Mrs. Rose I don't want any breakfast. Or stay, for I'm very hungry. I'll take a cup of tea and some toast up here. Peggy brought up the tray to the door. I hope you're not ill, sir, said she kindly. Not very. I shall be better when I get into the air. Mrs. Rose seems sadly put about, said she. She seemed so grieved like. I watched my opportunity and went out by the side door in the garden. Well, Mr. Morgan might have the better of it, but Mr. Harrison at least knows the better part of valour. God, that really got me. Really tickled me, that did. Oh. When knowing him like that, God. There's nothing more that I could say about that. I mean, I could say more about that chapter, but no. I just got to move on because I'll dwell on that forever otherwise. No. 23. I had intended to ask Mr. Morgan to call at the vicarage and give his part an explanation before they could hear the report. Now I thought that if I could see Sophie I would speak to her myself, but I did not wish to encounter the vicar. I went along the lane at the back of the vicarage and come suddenly upon Miss Bullock. She coloured and asked me if I would allow her to speak to me. I could only be resigned, but I thought I could probably set one report at rest by this conversation. She almost cried. I must tell you, Mr. Harrison, I have watched you here in order to speak to you. I heard with the greatest regret of Papa's conversation with you yesterday. She was fairly crying. I believe Mrs. Bullock finds me in her way and wants to have me married. It is the only way in which I can account for such a complete misrepresentation as she has sold Papa. I don't care for you in the least, sir. You never paid me any attention. You've been almost rude to me, and I have liked you the better. That's to say, I never have liked you. I am truly glad to hear what you say, answered I. Don't distress yourself. I was sure there was some mistake. But she cried bitterly. It is so hard to feel that my marriage, my absence, is desired so earnestly at home. I dread every new acquaintance we form with any gentleman. It is sure to be the beginning of a series of attacks on him, of which everybody must be aware, and which they may think I am willing party. But I should not mind if it were not for the conviction that she wishes me so earnestly away. Oh, my own dear mamma, you would never. She cried more than ever. I was truly sorry for her. I had just taken her hand and begun, My dear Miss Bullock, when the door to the wall of the vicarage garden opened. Here was the vicar, letting out Miss Tompkinson, whose face was all swelled with crying. He saw me, but he did not bow or make any sign. On the contrary, he looked down as from a severe eminence and shut the door hastily. I turned to Miss Bullock. The ads is about to come on, so I paused there. Everything that can go wrong is going wrong, and it's great. Oh. A classics is a classic for a reason. I've been meaning to read this one for a while, and I kept putting it off because I didn't think I'd enjoy it very much. And I was so badly wrong. Oh, this is really tickling me. Ooh. Right, ads is on. I'll have a drink of water. Oh, but just the timing. It's still unfortunate. And it's not even like it's out of nowhere. He's walking up the vicarage lane trying to avoid the vicar by the back door. And out comes Miss Tompkinson also trying to avoid public notice by the back door, and the vicar sees them. Oh. It's too good. It's too good. It's too well done. God. Mr. Morgan running out is still hitting in waves. Oh. It shouldn't be this funny. I'm distinctly having an overdue reaction to this, but it really just got me. It's such a rat bust to do, but I respect the hell out of it. Just running out, God. What a coward, what a man, I love him. Possibly my favourite character in all of fiction. Oh, I don't know why this is getting me so much. It just is something about it. I don't think it's the content so much. It's just the style, but it's so. It really caught me off guard, and yet it's so like. Sometimes a twist is really well foreshadowed. You know what I mean? Like, a good twist is always well foreshadowed. If you read a story and something really catches you off guard, then generally it means that it's badly written. Right? There should be signs pointing to something happening. And this manages to at once have been really well foreshadowed and to have completely taken me off guard. Because every mention of Miss Tompkinson and Mr. Morgan are like, yeah, he's nervous, he's very scared of her, he doesn't like to deal with her. He palms all his, the medical work off to Mr. Harrison because he doesn't want to be around her. And, he's intimidated by her. And then, obviously the marriage proposal comes out and it's a bit of a joke. And, he's going to be nervous about it. But then him immediately running to Paris. God. It makes so much sense with the context, but I did not expect it. Just didn't expect him to be so much of a rat, and God, it really got me. Really, truly did. I've never really heard much of Elizabeth Gaskell before, but I'm going to have to look up other stuff she's written, because God, that really got me. It really did. Oh. I'm tickled pink. Oh, right. Oh, right, the act almost over. I'll have another swallow of water. I should have another launch, but there's only 12 pages left to go through. Oh. Right, welcome back. For those of you who were in the act, I was certainly conducting and discussing with grace and deportment and not laughing myself silly at the vicar running away in the last chapter. Right, pressing on. Well, yeah. On the contrary, he looked down, as if from a severe eminence, and shut the door hastily. I turned to Miss Bullock. I'm afraid the vicar has been hearing something to my disadvantage from Miss Tompkinson, and it's very awkward. She finished my sentence. We found us here together, yes. But as long as we understand that we do not care for each other, it does not signify what people say. Ah, but to me it does, said I. I may perhaps tell you, but do not mention it to a creature. I'm attached to Miss Hunton. To Sophie? Oh, Mr. Harrison, I'm so glad. She's such a sweet creature. Oh, I wish you joy. Not yet. I've never spoken about it. Oh, but it's certain to happen. She jumped with a woman's rapidity to a conclusion, and then she began to praise Sophie. Never was a man yet who did not like to hear the praises of his mistress. I walked by her side. We come past the front of the vicarage together. I looked up and saw Sophie there, and she saw me. That afternoon she was sent away, sent to visit her aunt, ostensibly. In reality, because of the reports of my conduct, which were showered down upon the vicar, and one of which he saw confirmed by his own eyes. Things have fallen apart so wonderfully and so fast. But I would say I think it is a good thing to have. Let's take a moment to talk about a good subject here that I think deserves discussion. A friend with it, making a friend by way of finding someone you have no romantic attraction to, who you're being pressed against, is a really good way to make a friend. Like the idea that two people should be pressed together, like by concerned parties and friends and family who think they would make a good match, and completely not like each other at all, and then find out that it's mutual, is a really, really good way to make a strong connection with a person, because it immediately gives you something in common. I can't say that it's happened too many times, but from my experience of maybe twice, it does make a really good long-lasting connection and sets you on firm footing for a good friendship, as is demonstrated here by Miss Bullock. Right, pressing on though. 24. I heard of Sophie's departure as one heard of everything, soon after it had taken place. I did not care for the awkwardness of my situation, which had so perplexed and amused me in the morning. I felt that something was wrong, that Sophie were taken away from me. I sank in despair. If anybody would like to marry me, they might. I wasn't willing to be sacrificed. I did not speak to Mrs. Rose. She wondered at me and grieved over my coldness, I saw, but I left off feeling anything. Miss Tompkinson cut me in the street, and it did not break my heart. Sophie was gone away. That were all I cared for. Where had they sent her to? Who was her aunt that she should go and visit her? One day, I met Lizzie, who looked as though she had been told not to speak to me, but could not help doing it. Have you heard from your sister? Said I. Yes. Where is she? I hope she's well. She's at the Lyons. I was not much wiser. Oh yes, she's very well. Fanny says she was at the assembly last Wednesday and danced all night with the officers. I thought I would enter myself as a member of the Peace Society at once. She were a little fur and an hard-hearted creature. I don't think I wished Lizzie goodbye. Mourning for lost love, Lord. He's buried already. Good. 25. What most people would have considered a more serious evil than Sophie's absence befell me. I found that my practice were falling off. The prejudices of the town ran strongly against me. Mrs. Mutton told me all that was said. She heard it through Mrs. Horseman, or through Miss Horseman. It was said, cruel little town, my negligence or ignorance had been the cause of Walter's death. Miss Tyrrell had become worse under my treatment, and that John Brockner were all but dead, if it were not quite from my mismanagement. All Jack Marston's jokes and revelations, which had, I thought, gone to oblivion, were raked up to my discredit. He himself, formerly to my astonishment rather a favourite with the good people of Duncombe, was spoken of as one of my disreputable friends. In short, so prejudiced was the good people of Duncombe that I believe very little would have made them suspect me of brutal highway robbery, which took place in the neighbourhood about this time. Mrs. Mutton told me, apropos of the robbery, that she had never yet understood the cause of my year's imprisonment in Newgate. She had no doubt, from what Mr. Morgan had told her, there was some good reason for it, but I would tell her the particulars. She would like to know them. Miss Tompkinson sent for Mr. White from Chesterton to see Miss Caroline, and as they were coming over, all her old patients seemed to take advantage of it and send for him too. But the worst of all were the vicar's manner with me. If he had cut me, I could have asked him why he did so, but the freeze and change in his behaviour were indescribable. but bitterly felt. I heard of Sophie's gaiety from Lizzie. I thought it was right in her. Just then Mr. Morgan's fortnight of absence expired. I was wearied out by Mrs. Rose's tender vagaries, and took no comforts from her sympathy, which indeed I rather avoided. Her tears irritated instead of grieving me. I wished I could tell her at once that I had no intention of marrying her. I don't understand why he can't. I guess maybe he's trying to spare her feelings, but it does feel like that is something he should tell her. Anyway, 26. Mr. Morgan had not been at home for 2 hours before he was sent for to the vicarage. Sophie had come back, and I had never heard of it. She had come home ill and weary, and longing for rest, and the rest seemed approaching with awful strides. Mr. Morgan forgot all his Parisian adventures and all of his terror of Miss Tomkinson when he was sent for to see her. She reeled of a fever, which made fearful progress. When he told me, I wished to force the vicarage door, if I might but see her. But I controlled myself, and only cursed my weak indecision, which prevented my writing to her. Well, I had no patience. They would have had but a poor chance of attention. They hung about Mr. Morgan, who might see her, and did see her. From what he told me, I perceived that the measures he was adopting were powerless to check so sudden and violent an illness. Oh, if they would but let me see her, that were out of the question. But not merely that the vicar had heard of my character as a gay Lothario, but the doubts had been thrown out of my medical skill. The accounts grew worse. Suddenly my resolution was taken. Mr. Morgan's very regard for Sophie made him more than usually timid in his practice. I had my horse saddled and galloped to Chesterton. I took the express train to town. Went to the doctor and told him every particular of the case. He listened but shook his head. Wrote down a prescription and recommended a new preparation not yet in full use. A preparation of a poison, in fact. It may serve her, he said. There is a chance in such a state of things as you describe. Must be given on the 5th day if the pulse will bear it. Crabbe makes up the preparation most skilfully. Let me hear from you, I beg. Went to Crabbe's. I begged to make it up myself. My hands trembled so that I could not weigh the quantities. I asked the young man to do it for me. I went without touching food to the station, with my medicine and my prescription in my pocket. Back we flew through the country. I sprung on Bay Melden, which my groom had in waiting, and galloped across the country to Duncombe. But I drew bridle when I come to the top of the hill above the old hall, from which we catch the first glimpse of town, for I thought within myself that she might be dead, and I dreaded to come near certainty. The hawthorns was out in the woods, the young lambs was in the meadows, the song of the thrushes filled the air, but it only made the thought the more terrible. What if, in this world of open life, she lies dead? I heard the church bell soft and clear. I seconded to listen. Was it the parson bell? No, it was ringing 8 o'clock. I put spurs to my horse down the hill as it was. We dashed into the town. I turned him, saddle and bridle, into the stable yard and went off to Mr. Morgan's. Is she? I said. How is she? Very ill, my poor fellow. I see how it was with you, is with you. She may live, but I fear. My dear sir, I am very much afraid. I told him of my journey in consultation with Dr. Blank, and showed him the prescription. His hand trembled as he put on his spectacles to read it. This is a very dangerous medicine, sir, said he, with his finger under the name of the poison. It is a new preparation, said I. Doctor relies much upon it. I dare not administer it, he replied. I have never tried it. It must be very powerful. I dare not play tricks in this case. I believe I stamped impatience, but it were all of no use. My journey had been in vain. The more I urged the imminent danger of the case requiring some powerful remedy, the more nervous he became. I told him I would throw out the partnership. I threatened him with that, though in fact it were only what I felt I ought to do, and resolved upon before Sophie's illness, as I had lost the confidence of his patients. He only said, I cannot help it, sir. I shall regret it for your father's sake, but I must do my duty. I dare not run the risk of giving Miss Sophie this violent medicine, a preparation of a deadly poison. I left him without a word. You were quite right in adhering to his own views, as I can see now. At the time I thought him brutal and obstinate. And that's the end of chapter 26, and I paused to have a quick swallow of water. Well, that's taking a turn for the dramatic, Lord. This book is, I must admit, it's gone it sort of goes all over the place. You know, it seems like light and sort of casual and slightly funny at first. Then you have the brutal sort of death of a child. Then you go back to the sort of more tight drama and the sort of, the friend with the ill reputation, the downfall. You have the comedy of errors, the actual dire thing. Now Sophie's sick and it becomes this like high chasing drama where he's riding his horse and going all over the place. It does seem to cover a lot of ground, but I'm enjoying it. That being the case, let's press on, shall we? 27. I went home. I spoke rudely to Mrs. Rose, who awaited my return at the door. I rushed past and locked myself in my room. I could not go to bed. The morning sun came pouring in and enraged me, as everything did since Mr. Morgan refused. I pulled the blind down so violently the string broke. What did it signify? The light might come in. What would the sun to me? Then I remembered that sun might be shining on her, dead. I sat down and covered my face. Mrs. Rose knocked at the door. I opened it. She had never been in bed and had been crying too. Mr. Morgan wants to speak to you, sir. I rushed back for my medicine and went to him. He stood at the door, pale and anxious. She's alive, sir, said he. And that's all. We have sent for Dr. Hamilton. I am afraid he will not come in time. Do you know, sir, I think we should venture with Dr. Sanction to give her that medicine. It is but a chance, but it is the only one, I'm afraid. Fairly cried before he ended. I'll pause here a moment to just say, whenever I'm referring to doctor and then not saying a name, the text has like doctor and then it's a dash mark. I don't know why so many books do that, where they just don't put a name in for someone, but presumably it's to stand in for like a famous or notable doctor at the time. Right. He faintly cried before he had ended. I've got it here, I said, setting off to walk. He could not go fast. I beg your pardon, sir, said he, for my abrupt refusal last night. Indeed, sir, said I. I would much rather to beg your pardon, or very violent. Oh, never mind, never mind. Will you repeat what Doctor said? I did so. Then I asked, with a meekness that astonished myself, if I might go in and administer it. No, sir, said he. I am afraid not. I'm sure your good heart would not wish to give pain. Besides, it might agitate her if she has any consciousness before death. In her delirium, she has often mentioned your name, and, sir, I'm sure you won't name it again, as it may, in fact, be considered a professional secret. But I did hear our good vicar speak a little strongly about you. In fact, sir, I did hear him curse you. You see, the mischief it might make in the parish, I'm sure, if this were known. I gave him the medicine, and watched him in, and saw the door shut. I hung about the place all day. Poor and rich all come to inquire. The county people drove up in their carriages. The old and the lame come on their crutches. Their anxiety did my heart good. Mr. Morgan told me that she slept, and I watched Dr. Hamilton in the house. The night come on, she slept. I watched around the house. I saw the light high up, burning still and steady. And I saw it moved. It was a crisis in one way or the other. 28. I'm just going to press right on here through, I think. 28. Mr. Morgan come out. Good old man. The tears was running down his cheeks. He could not speak, but he kept shaking my hands. I did not want words. I understood that she was better. Dr. Hamilton says it was the only medicine that could have saved her. I was an old fool, sir. I beg your pardon. The vicar shall know all. I beg your pardon, sir, if I was abrupt. Everything went on brilliantly from this time. Mr. Bullock called to apologise for his mistake, and consequent upbraiding. John Bruckner came home, brave and well. There was still Mrs. Tompkinson in the ranks of the enemy, and Mrs. Rose, too much, I feared, in the ranks of the friends. 29. One night she had gone to bed, and I was thinking of going. I had been studying in the back room, where I went for refuge from her in present positions of affairs. I read a good number of surgical books about this time, and also Vanity Fair, when I heard a loud, long, continued knocking at the door, enough to waken the whole street. Before I could get to open it, I heard that well-known bass of Jack Marshland's, once heard, never to be forgotten, pipe up the Negro song. Who's that knocking at the door? Oof. 1850. Of course, there's some casual racism. Thought we just kept it out. It was raining hard at the time, and I stood waiting to let him in. He would finish his melody in open air, loud and clear along the street, it sounded. I saw Miss Tompkinson's nightcapped head emerge from a window. She called out, "Police! Police!" Now, there were no police, only a rheumatic constable in the town, but it was a custom of the ladies, when alarmed at night, to call in imaginary police, which had, they thought, an intimidating effect. Everyone knew the real state of the unwatched town. I did not much mind it in general. Just now, however, I wanted to regain my character, so I pulled Jack in, quavering as he entered. "You've spoiled a good shake," said he. "That's what you have. I'm nearly up to Jenny Lind, and you see I'm a nightingale like her." He sat up late, and I don't know how it were, but I told him all my matrimonial misadventures. "I thought I could imitate your hand pretty well," said he. "My word, it was a flaming valentine. No wonder she thought you loved her." "So that was your doing, was it? Now, I'll tell you what you should do to make up for it. You should write me a letter confessing your acts, a letter that I can show. Give me pen and paper, my boy. You shall dictate. With a deeply penitent heart will that do for a beginning?" I told him what to write, a simple, straightforward confession of his practical joke. I enclosed it in a few lines of regret that, unknown to me, any of my friends should have so acted. That's the end of chapter 29. Well, that's one little mystery wrapped up. And Lord knows, Jack Marshall is he's a funny character, but he is absolutely a prick. At the same time, he's the sort of prick you do have as a friend because he's very funny. But you can't hate him sometimes. Anyhow, press on. 30. All this time, I knew that Sophie was slowly recovering. One day I met Miss Bullock, who had seen her. "We've been talking about you," she said with a bright smile, but since she knew I disliked her, she felt quite at ease and could smile very pleasantly. I understood that she had been explaining the misunderstanding about herself to Sophie, so that when Jack Marshall's note had been sent to Miss Tompkinson's, I thought myself in a fair way to have my character established in two quarters. But the third was my dilemma. Mrs. Rose had really so much of my true regard for her good qualities. I disliked the idea of a formal explanation, in which a good deal must be said on my side to wound her. We had become very much estranged ever since I had heard of the report of my engagement to her. I saw she grieved over it. When Jack Marshall stayed with us, I felt on my ease in the presence of a third person. But he told me confidentially that he durst not stay long, for fear some of the ladies should snap him up and marry him. Indeed, I myself did not think it unlikely that he would snap one of them up if he could. But when we met Miss Bullock one day, and heard her hopeful, joyous account of Sophie's progress, to whom she were a daily visitor, he asked me who that bright-looking girl were. When I told him she was the Miss Bullock of whom I had spoken to him, he was pleased to observe that he thought I had been a great fool, and asked me if Sophie had anything like such splendid eyes. He made me repeat about Miss Bullock's unhappy circumstances at home, and then become very thoughtful. A most unusual, morbid symptom in his case. Soon after, he went by Mr. Morgan's kind offices and explanations. I was permitted to see Sophie. I might not speak much, it was prohibited for fear of agitating her. We talked of the weather and the flowers, and we were silent. But a little white thin hand lay in mine. "Welcome back, Abbe, and fair enough, I shall drink on you. The last time I wore her, in fact. The strawberry to your health, though." What is it they say in that one book? It is finished. Thank you kindly. I probably did need that. Well, yeah. But a little white thin hand lay in mine. We understood each other without words. I had a long interview with the vicar afterwards, and come away glad and satisfied. Mr. Morgan called in the afternoon, evidently anxious, though he made no direct inquiries, he was too polite for that, to hear the result of my visit at the vicarage. I told him to give me joy. He shook me warmly by the hand, and then rubbed his own together. I thought I would consult him about my dilemma with Mrs. Rose, who, I was afraid, would be deeply affected by my engagement. "There is only one awkward circumstance," said I, "about Mrs. Rose. I hesitated how to word the fact of her having received congratulations on her supposed engagement with me, and her manifest attachment, but before I could speak, he broke in. "My dear sir, you need not trouble yourself about that. She will have a home. In fact, sir," he said, reddening a little, "I thought it would perhaps put a stop to those reports connecting my name with Miss Tompkinson's, if I married someone else. I hoped it might prove an efficacious contradiction, and I was struck with admiration at Mrs. Rose's undying memory of her late husband. Not to be prolix, I have this morning obtained Mrs. Rose's consent to marry her, in fact, sir. And he, jerking at the climax. Here were an event. And Mr. Morgan had never heard the report about Miss Rose and me. This day I think she would have taken me if I had proposed. So much the better. Marriages was in fashion that year. Mr. Bullock met me one morning as I was going a ride with Sophie. He and I had quite gotten over our misunderstandings, thanks to Jemima, and were as friendly as ever. This morning he was chuckling aloud as he walked. "Stop, Mr. Harrison," he said as I went quickly past. "Have you heard the news? Miss Horseman has just told me Miss Caroline has eloped with young Hoggins. She's 10 years older than he is. How can her gentility like being married to a tallow chandler? It's a very good thing for her, though," he added, in a more serious manner. "Old Hoggins is very rich, and though he's angry just now, he will be soon reconciled." Any vanity I might have entertained on the score of 3 ladies who were at one time said to be captivated by my charms were being rapidly dispersed. Soon after Mr. Hoggins' marriage, I met Miss Tompkinson face to face for the first time since our memorable conversation. She stopped me and said, "Don't refuse to receive my congratulations, Mr. Harrison, on your most happy engagement to Miss Hunt. I owe you an apology, too, for my behaviour when I last saw you at our house. I really did think Caroline was attached to you then, and it irritated me, I confess, in a very wrong and unjustifiable way. But I heard her telling Mr. Hoggins only yesterday that she'd been attached to him for years, ever since he was in Pinafores she dated it from. When I asked her afterwards how she could say so after her distress on hearing that false report about you and Mrs. Rose, she cried and said I never had understood her, and that her hysterics, which alarmed me so much, were simply caused by eating pickled cucumber. I am very sorry for my stupidity and improper way of speaking, but I hope we are friends now, Mr. Harrison, for I should wish to be liked by Sophie's husband." Good Miss Tompkinson, to believe the substitution of indigestion for disappointed affection. I shook her warmly by the hand, and we have been quite all right ever since. I think I told you she is baby's godmother. I'm really enjoying this, I must admit. This is very old sort of humour in it. I really feel like I'm coming across an old man not being so tickled, but I'm really enjoying it. I should say that's the end of chapter 30, but yeah. 31. I had some difficulty in persuading Jack Marshall to be groomsman. When he heard all the arrangements, he come. Miss Bullock were bridesmaid. He liked us all so well that he come again at Christmas, and were far better behaved than he had been the year before. He won golden opinions indeed. Miss Tompkinson said he were a reformed young man. We dined all together at Mr. Morgan's, and the vicar wanted us to go there, but from what Sophie told me, Ellen were not confident of the mincemeat, and rather dreaded so large a party. We had a jolly day of it. Mrs. Morgan was as kind and motherly as ever. Miss Osmond certainly did say out at the door that the vicar was thinking of Miss Tompkinson for his second, or else, I think, we had no other report circulated in consequence of her happy Merry Christmas Day. And it is a wonder, considering how Jack Marshall went on with Jemima. Here, Sophie come back from putting baby to bed, and Charles wakened up. No. And that's the end of the story. Even the last, fair enough, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's quite an abrupt ending, but even with the last, that got me, God. And Charles wakened up, God, right to the start. He did fall asleep, the rat. Lord, yeah. Oh, this story has really gotten me. I don't know. Oh, God, I don't remember, Abby, if you left before the Did you leave before Mr. Morgan's letter or afterwards? Because God, I hope you were there for that. Fair enough. Yeah, that's the end of the piece. Oh. The whole thing goes on, the old tale, and his friend falls asleep and sleeps through a lot of it. God. They manages to wrap it up pretty neatly too, in very quick little time. Everyone goes from feeling they've been spurned to Mr. Harrison to happily married, including the terrifying Miss Thompson, who is in with a thing for the vicar. Mr. Morgan, who marries Mrs. Rose out of which got fear of Mrs. Tompkins. Our lovely Miss Thompson the younger, Tompkinson's the younger, who runs off with a Chandler and professes to have loved him forever. Lord, the whole thing that wraps up so neatly. And I mean, there's not much more to tell of it. I was expecting some sort of like proper wrapping up there, you know, like a, and with like, you know, the arrangements of the marriage or some such thing. But no, just Sophie comes back into the room, his friend wakes up, and the story's over. God. I was putting off reading this book because I didn't think I'd like it. I thought it would be like dry and dull and a little bit sad. And this might be one of the favourite things I've ever read on this, well, for one of these streams. Lord almighty, that really did get me. I'm gonna have to find more Gaskell now. I was like, oh, that's annoying actually, because my whole point in reading this one and doing a couple of the other ones I plan to do in the short term is I've got a few like loose novels that I want to clear up so I can start getting some collections together and doing more of one author at a time. And now now Elizabeth Gaskell isn't one of those loose novels because I enjoyed it so much I've got to go find more Gaskell. God knows if I'll be able to. I've never seen any more of her about, but yeah, she just shot very high on my esteem. I'd rate that book very solidly. Right, let's go back to my own little chambers to do some accounting, shall we? God. Right. Well, yeah, hopefully everyone should have gotten their badges by now. So, I just got to enjoy those if you like them. Yeah, what is there to say about this book? Lord, I don't remember the last time a book made me laugh this much. That's genuine. I've generally enjoyed that so much more than I expected. And admittedly, in the first probably half of that, I was lightly entertained, but I wasn't anything special. But from the moment Mr. Morgan decided, like, I was enjoying it even before that, but the moment Mr. Morgan decides he's going to rat out the second he's afraid he's going to get an engagement and just runs away to Paris, that had me by the neck. God, I really like that. It's not a book I'd ever really consider before or heard of, and it's just, just one of these, like, oh yeah, it's a good book, people have like mentioned it. Yeah, I'll pick it up, I'll have a look at it. God, that got me. That is a standout in my collection. Oh, I genuinely enjoyed that more than I can reasonably say. Oh, that's going to hold a very special place in my heart from now on. God, 176 years old and it still reduced me to tears. Oh, yeah, that's fair. I probably need that, ain't you, Naska? Do the neck crack so you can hear it if anything does go. And we stand for a stretch. Right. Ooh. Thank you for that. Ooh. I do appreciate it. You're very welcome, Abby. Thank you for being here. Hope your dinner was good. And thank you everyone for being here. Naska, I know, is here, and I assume some people are lurking. Again, I don't know numbers, but I do thank all of you for being here, and I hope you've enjoyed the stream. You're very welcome, Naska. I'm trying to think what else I can say to sort of sum that up. But yeah, I mean, it's just a very good comedy. I mean, the only thing that really stands out a bit weird for it is the sort of death of the young lad, Walter, who. It's a very grim, harrowing chapter, and it adds a lot of weight to the story that it otherwise sort of lacks. And it does almost feel a little bit out of step with the rest of it, but it does otherwise do a very good job of building it. And even then, it sort of does develop relationships. I don't know. I don't think it's a perfect story. There are some books that stand out 10 out of 10s, but I'd give this a 9 out of 10. It's a little rough around some of the edges, and there are some parts that are a bit weird, but I really did enjoy it. It's just, oh God, I think that is, it's certainly my favourite Regency novel I've ever read, which is probably a bit fair. No, that's fine, it's fine. I fully understand. The betting thing, oh, that's something I need to redeem that. Thanks for reminding me. For all of you who didn't bet on me, congratulations. You've won. And for all of those who didn't bet against me, I should say, I'm terribly sorry for you. Okay, it won't actually let me resolve the prediction because no one bet on it. I just have to delete it. That's annoying. Oh well. But yeah. Still, I enjoyed it. Oh, it won't let me delete it either. Twitch is feeling funny tonight. Well, it's fine. We'll resolve that out later. But yeah. Still, I'm glad you came along. Congratulations again, Gaskell, though, on another. Oh no. Well, let's call it. Well, either I'll clip it or Gaskell will, and I'll feature it so that you have a chance to see it. I didn't catch what it was because I'm not allowed to see the occult secrets. I'm sure it'll be available for you. But yeah. Oh. Yeah, congratulations on. I think that's your fourth, isn't it? You really are getting along with those, and I appreciate it. Oh, good. Then yeah, I'll yeah. If you clip that, then I'll find that and feature it so that people have a chance to see it. I normally don't like to leave featured clips up for too long because I sort of feel like I should have people like, you know, I do audiobooks, people should have access to them. But I've got a couple of poetry clips featured at the minute because I'm trying it out. So I'll feature that one as well and leave it up for a while, so you have a chance to see it if you want to see it. I should probably feature all of them actually. That would make sense. But yeah. Other than that, what am I? Yeah. This has just been a good time. Yeah, I want to do more sort of longer readings in the kind of future. I've got a few sort of like novels of that sort of length, sort of 80 pages round and about. I'm hoping to do more of them in one sitting on nights when I don't have other things on. So hopefully we'll be doing a few more of these. I don't know if we'll do badges for all of them, because sometimes I just can't. Like the thing is, I go into a lot of these just blind, and I don't know anything about them, so I don't know what to do for badges a lot of the time. But I'll see about it. Yeah, we've got stuff going on. Hopefully those will be coming in the coming days, weeks. Yeah. I don't know about tomorrow. I've got no idea if something's on or not, but we'll see. But we'll be back for something tomorrow anyway. If it's short, it'll probably be shorter if I'm honest. I enjoyed doing this, I really did. But I'm also like, I probably shouldn't do two of these two of these long ones in a thing, because otherwise I'd do my throat damage. Although it still feels good. Hey Blake, thank you for being here. I hope you've enjoyed it too. But yeah. Thank you everyone for being here. I guess I do have to once again thank, because I made the habit of doing this at the end of stream, so thank you Ratfucker14 for the follow. I appreciate it, even though I am nervous. Other than that though, yeah, I don't think I've got too much else to say. But yeah, we'll do some more Gaskell at some point. No idea when, because again I get books when I find them, but we'll have to do some. But yeah. Other than that though, thank you everybody for being here. I do so much appreciate it. And I wish you all a lovely rest of your day, whatever time it is for you. Until next time. Look, Plague, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but following me with your old accounts is questionable anyway. What are we doing? So, yeah, thank you all for being there. I do so much appreciate it. You're all lovely people, and I hope you have the rest and the best until the next time. And as always, ta-ra.